Chapter 413. Li Qianxue couldn't be blamed for conspiring against Su Qinghui. She felt that she had seen through him. This man had no heart. Or maybe he had a heart, but his heart was not with her. It was with someone else. Thinking of her daughter, Li Qianxue's face darkened again. Su Qinghui, don't think that I will forgive you if you humble yourself. I won't talk to you until Peijian comes back. Qianxue. Old Master Li couldn't stand it anymore. Are you going to celebrate the new year or not? Li Qianxue was angry, but because of Old Master Li, she finally raised her glass. She didn't touch her glass with Su Qinghui's. She just raised it and took another sip. Su Qinghui didn't relax when he saw that. Instead, he felt even more depressed. Li Qianxue loved Su Peijian so much. If one day she found out that Su Peijian wasn't her daughter, it was the new year. It should be very lively. Su Qinghui suddenly felt a chill in his heart. After eating, Su Qingsang put away the bowls. Although she brought a lot of dishes, the portion was not big. She watched TV with Xiang Kaiping while eating. Most of it was done. She cleaned up the leftovers and washed the bowls. Then she sat down to watch the Spring Festival Gala with Xiang Kaiping. Su Qingsang rarely watched the Spring Festival Gala. It was rare for her to watch it with Xiang Kaiping. She didn't think it was as ugly as the people on the internet said. Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Qingsang with a faint smile on her face. Qingsang, I'm really happy to spend the new year with you. Me too. Su Qingsang looked at Xiang Kaiping. Finally, I'm not alone anymore. Sometimes I feel that I might be dreaming. Otherwise, how could I have such a good daughter like you? Su Qingsang smiled and said, Mom, what are you talking about? I'm right here. Do you still think that you're dreaming? Yes. Xiang Kaiping thought of what she had been through all these years. She looked a little emotional. I think I'm a person with little luck. That's why I often wonder if I'm lucky enough to have such a good daughter like you. Su Qingsang's heart skipped a beat. She held Xiang Kaiping's hand and said uncomfortably, Mom, I'm not going to be happy if you say that again. Can I also say that I'm a lucky person? Otherwise, how could I have such a good mother like you? All right. Xiang Kaiping finally stopped talking. I won't talk about it anymore. It's the new year, let's talk about something happy. That's more like it. Su Qingsang secretly heaved a sigh of relief. It just so happened that the Spring Festival Gala had reached the part of the skit. Xiang Kaiping focused on the TV. Xiang Kaiping was injured, and she was not young anymore. After looking at her for a while, she became very sleepy. Su Qingsang fetched some water, carefully helped her wash up, and let her sleep first. After Xiang Kaiping fell asleep, she quietly turned off the TV and went out with her phone to call Hu Jinyao. The phone rang for a while, but no one answered. Su Qingsang frowned and gently put the phone back into her pocket. She wanted to go back to the ward to sleep, but she was afraid that Hu Jinyao would call her back later. After hesitating for a while, Su Qingsang set the phone to vibrate and went back to the ward. Lying on the small bed in the ward, she couldn't fall asleep. What was Hu Jinyao doing? Why didn't he answer the phone? Last time, he said that many relatives were coming. Was it because there were too many relatives, and he was busy dealing with them? Su Qingsang fell asleep while her mind was running wild. In a daze, she felt the phone under her pillow vibrate. She subconsciously reached out and saw the screen lit up. Su Qingsang was still not fully awake. Looking at Xiang Kaiping who was still sleeping, she picked up the phone, put on her coat, and went out to the corridor to answer the phone. Are you asleep? Hu Jinyao's voice came from the other end of the phone. Su Qingsang blinked. The cold wind in the corridor woke her up instantly. Yes. I'm asleep. You called me just now? Yes. What are you busy with? Nothing. In fact, the Hu family was really lively this year. This year, because of Hua Jinyao's wedding, old master Hua's younger brother, Hua Yangyuan, also returned to Rome City for the new year. As for old master Hua's younger sister, Hua Yangxiu, she was with her husband and would only be back in 2 days. Hua Yangyuan worked in the province. In the past, he would spend the new year in the same place where he worked. After all, with his status, there were countless people who came to visit him during the Lunar New Year. He used to be afraid of trouble, so he rarely came to Rome City. After all, old master Hua wouldn't be able to live in peace once he arrived. He had to entertain those people. Although Hua Yangyuan was a high-ranking official, he still respected old master Hua. This year was different. On the one hand, Hua Jinyao, the eldest grandson of the Hua family, was getting married. This was a joyous occasion. They hadn't been in Rome City before, so they hadn't been able to come over. Now, they were taking advantage of the new year to visit their grandnephew's wife. On the other hand, it was time for Hua Yangyuan to retire. He had completed the retirement procedures in the second half of the year and planned to return to Rome City to enjoy his retirement. As for his network in a province, he was not worried at all. He was different from Hua Mingguang and Hua Mingliang, who liked to do business. His eldest son, Hua Mingfan, had already finished his training. In a few years, he would be able to go further up the ladder. Since the young man had already gone up, he could naturally retire as an old man. He felt relaxed and energized. He wanted to see what Hua Jinyao's other half was like when he came to Rome City. However, when Hua Yangyuan arrived, he realized that Hua Jinyao's wife hadn't come back. Hua Yangyuan was fine. He had been in the officialdom for a long time and was used to hiding. However, Hua Mingliang's 2 sons weren't so good-tempered. Granduncle. It's because you're too insignificant. Sister-in-law doesn't want to come back. Isn't that so? If you ask me, Jinyao dotes on his wife too much. He's probably the first person in Rome City who doesn't spend the first year of his marriage with his in-laws. Hua Mingmei laughed exaggeratedly. Why are you talking about this during the Lunar New Year? If you ask me, Jinyao's marriage might not be true. After all, Dad wants to have a great-grandson every day. Isn't it popular to rent a girlfriend for the Lunar New Year? If you can rent a girlfriend, can't you rent a wife too? Sister-in-law, speaking of this, I think you should really discipline your Jinyao. It would be a joke if people knew that a family like ours has to rent a wife. Hua Jinyao listened to his relative's words. He was expressionless and unmoved. Lu Tongjia's face darkened when she heard those words. Chapter 4:14. It was one thing for Hua Jinyao to marry a woman she didn't like. It was another thing for him to stay in Lin City every day for that woman. Now, he didn't even bring her back for the new year. She was such an ignorant woman, but Hua Jinyao treated her like a treasure. Lu Tongjia wanted to lose her temper. But after thinking about it, she held it in. We shouldn't get involved in the affairs of young people. He can do whatever he wants. Lu Tongjia looked at Hua Mingmei. It's the new year. It's rare for you to come back. Let's talk about something happy. Hua Mingmei was led by Lu Tongjia to change the topic, but Hua Jinyao just felt bored. He looked at Lu Tongjia, not sure if he was disappointed or right. But this was Lu Tongjia. No matter how bad he was outside and how dissatisfied she would immediately put away her dissatisfaction and speak up for him when there were outsiders around. And he was like a bystander, enjoying a good performance. Hua Jinyao looked at the group of people expressionlessly. His family. His flesh and blood. Among them were his closest parents. But he didn't feel any parental love from his parents. He thought of Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping. Xiang Kaiping wasn't Su Qingsang's biological mother, but she treated Su Qingsang better than a real mother. All of a sudden, he felt annoyed. He stood up and walked out. Where are you going? Lu Tongjia saw that her son was about to leave. The whole family is here. Where are you going? Nowhere. I'm just going to make a phone call. Hua Jinyao turned around and glanced at Hua Mingmei. He seemed to be mocking her. After all, my wife is rented. If I don't call her now, I'm afraid that someone will offer a higher price, and my wife will run away with someone else. Hua Jinyao left just like that. Hua Mingmei finally realized that she had been insulted by Hua Jinyao. Her face turned green. Sister-in-law, look at him. Look at his attitude. Lu Tongjia didn't look happy either. Since when did she and Hua Jinyao become strangers? Their relationship was getting worse and worse. Hua Jinyao didn't want to repair it, and neither did she. There was clearly a better solution, but the mother and son were stuck in a deadlock. No one was willing to lower their heads first. Hua Mingmei still wanted to complain. However, seeing Lu Tongjia's expression, Su Qingsang knew that if she said more, she would be disliked. After thinking for a while, Su Qingsang gave up. Hua Jinyao shook his head and tried not to think about those annoying things. Don't you want to stay up all night? Su Qingsang's voice came through the phone gently, like a feather gently tickling his heart. Yes. But I want to stay up with you on New Year's Eve. Staying with Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping made him feel more at home. Next year, we can definitely stay up together. Yes. Hua Jinyao nodded. He was very happy with Su Qingsang's affirmation. By the way, is Mom asleep? Yes. I went to bed early. Su Qingsang looked out of the hospital. She could vaguely hear the sound of fireworks in the distance, but she couldn't see them from the corridor. She took her phone and walked towards the window at the end of the corridor. What about you? Have you eaten? Yes. The Hua family's New Year's Eve dinner this year was very lively because of Hua Yang Yuan's visit. I ate too. Su Qingsang had already walked to the window. She could see that there were really people setting off fireworks and not far away. What did you eat? It's just you and Mom. You didn't just eat casually, did you? Hua Jinyao had said that he would help her arrange everything, but she refused. Why would I? It's New Year's Eve. I asked Sister Lu to make dumplings. She also cooked a few side dishes. We even stir-fried the sausages that Mom made. It smells really good. I want to eat. Hua Jinyao had been away from Su Qingsang for 10 days. Although they could call each other every day, he didn't realize that he missed her very much until they were really apart. When you come back after New Year's, I'll ask Sister Lu to cook for you. I want to eat what you cook. Can I? Hua Jinyao took the opportunity to make a request. Hua Jinyao. Her cooking skills were actually very average. She could only cook a few simple vegetables. My cooking doesn't taste good. I don't care. Anyway, I want to eat what you cook. Just tell me if you'll cook for me or not. This person really had the potential to be a scoundrel. Yes. I'll cook for you, okay? That's what you said. Hua Jinyao's hazy mood was swept away at this moment. I'll be waiting. Su Qingsang wanted to laugh. She wasn't a chef, and she rarely had to cook. Hua Jinyao knew all this, but he could still look forward to her cooking with a calm face. Aren't you afraid that the food I cook will poison you to death? To die under a peony, I'd be a romantic even as a ghost. Not to mention dying under the delicacies of my wife. They hadn't seen each other for 10 days. This guy was good at being glib. Su Qingsang couldn't help but roll her eyes over the phone. All right. You go stay up with Grandpa and the others. Su Qingsang tightened her clothes. The window was a little windy. I'm going back to sleep. No. Hua Jinyao looked at the time. Talk with me for another 10 minutes. Talk for 10 minutes? What do you want? I just want to hear your voice. Hua Jinyao's voice came to Su Qingsang's ears through the phone. His voice was a little deep, and it rang softly beside her ear. Su Qingsang suddenly didn't feel hot. Far away in the sky, another firework exploded. She thought of the surprise Hu Jinyao prepared for her birthday. Although it was still a short time, she felt like everything happened yesterday. There was another loud bang, and the sky continued to explode with fireworks. Hu Jinyao's voice sounded at the same time. Happy New Year. Su Qingsang smiled. She finally knew why Hu Jinyao asked her to talk for another 10 minutes. The sound of fireworks kept going. Not only on Su Qingsang's side, but she could also faintly hear the sound of firecrackers on Hu Jinyao's side. Happy New Year. After midnight, it was a new year. Qingsang, I really want to see you soon. Me too. Su Qingsang heard the sound of fireworks around her. Several people were setting off fireworks in the square outside the hospital. Qingsang, do you have any wishes for the new year? I didn't come back to spend the new year with you. What do you want as a new year gift? I'll give it to you. Hu Jinyao's voice sounded with the sound of fireworks, but it was still very clear. No need. Su Qingsang shook her head. I don't lack anything. Then you can make a wish. Hu Jinyao said half jokingly and half seriously, what wish do you have? I'll help you fulfill it. Su Qingsang looked at the flying fireworks in the sky and didn't answer Hu Jinyao. Instead, she thought about what wish she had. Her wish was for the people she cared about to be well. She looked at the night sky for a while. She thought, if I really have to fulfill a wish. Chapter 4:15. Su Qingsang hoped to get that answer. It wasn't because she didn't like Xiang Kaiping, nor was it because she wanted to recognize her biological mother or anything else. She just suddenly thought of something after seeing Xiang Kaiping. If Xiang Kaiping had been lonely for more than 20 years, then was her biological mother even more lonely than Xiang Kaiping? Xiang Kaiping sold her house and went to the north to do business. She was resourceful and bold. But they both missed her so much. What about that woman? What about the woman who gave birth to her? Would she be living a bad life in a place she didn't know? Living a bad life? Su Qingsang didn't want to think like that, but she couldn't help it. In the first 20 years, she knew that maternal love was hopeless, so she didn't crave it. But in the past few months, she looked at Xiang Kaiping and had these thoughts. She thought, whether she would recognize that woman in the end or not. She wanted to do something for her, to thank her for giving birth to her and bringing her into this world. As for the rest, she would think about it after she found the person. Honey? Hu Jinyao's voice sounded on the other side. Su Qingsang came back to her senses and smiled at the fireworks in the night sky. Hu Jinyao, can you really fulfill my wish? Of course. Hu Jinyao nodded. Even if you want the stars in the sky, I can pick one for you. You're coaxing me again. Su Qingsang didn't want to play along. Yes, I said I want the stars in the sky. Give me a meteorite later. You don't like it? Hu Jinyao sounded a little regretful. Don't underestimate meteorites. Many meteorites have research value. They're more expensive than diamonds. He was talking nonsense with a serious face again. Yes, yes, yes. They're more expensive than diamonds. Don't give me diamonds later. Just buy a few meteorites and put them in a room. Why don't you just open a meteorite museum and exhibit them directly? Isn't that a good idea? Honey, you really know me. Hu Jinyao casually leaned against the wall and looked at the same night sky. His eyes flickered. My dream was to open a museum. To exhibit something that no one else has seen. Over the phone, Hu Jinyao's eyes flashed with loneliness and nostalgia. How did the little boy, who had always wanted to open a museum, disappear? Su Qingsang listened to his nonsense and didn't believe a word of it. She almost lost her temper. What a great dream. Why didn't you become one in the end? Opening a museum is just spending money and not making money. I have to make money to support my wife first. Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang finally found a loophole. When you were thinking about earning money to support your wife, I wasn't your wife yet, was I? That's right. Although you are not my wife, I had foresight at that time. He knew that he had to save his wife's money first. Look at how smart your husband is. Su Qingsang was amused by him. Hua Jinyao, it's a pity that you weren't invited to the Spring Festival Gala. You're so talkative, it would be a pity if you didn't become a comedian. That's true. They had no taste. How about I tell you next time? Hua Jinyao climbed up the pole, which made Su Qingsang really happy. Sure. In the future, you should learn more. When I go home, you can perform crosstalk for me. Sure. That's a deal. All right. Su Qingsang was defeated by him. It's getting late. Let's rest. Okay. Then go rest. Don't be too tired. If there's anything, call Xiao Yu and Xiao Ning. Hua Jinyao was about to hang up, but he suddenly called her, wife. Yes? I originally booked a ticket for tomorrow and wanted to come over to accompany you. But my great-uncle is coming. Later, my great-aunt will also come over. I might not be able to come to Lin City until after the 3rd day of Chinese New Year. It's okay. You should do your own things. Su Qingsang was very understanding of Hua Jinyao on this point. Say hello to your great-uncle and great-aunt for me. I'll definitely go back next time. I know. My great-uncle is okay. He's easy to talk to, and after he retires, he will almost always be in Rong City. But my great-aunt doesn't come often. When you come back, we should pay her a visit. Hua Jinyao's great-aunt, Hua Yangxiu, was a commander and currently served in a military area. She lived with her husband in the military compound for many years and rarely came to Rong City. Okay. Su Qingsang didn't avoid it. Marrying Hua Jinyao meant that she had to accept his large family as relatives. Although she wasn't used to facing relatives at home, she would try her best to get along with them. My great-aunt is a good person. You'll know when you meet her. I trust you. Speaking of this, Su Qingsang also thought of something. By the way, there's something I want to ask you. What? Su Qingsang pursed her lips and thought of something. In the past, on the first day of every year, although I didn't like it, I would still go to the Su family to wish old Master Li and my father a happy new year. Since she moved out of college, she would still go back to the Su family for the new year if she was outside. The year before last, she helped her colleagues on duty. This year, she still had to be on duty on the first day of the year, but she was a little hesitant. Hua Jinyao, I actually don't want to go to the Su family this year. She wasn't angry at Su Qinghui, but she didn't want to see him either. Don't go if you don't want to, Hua Jinyao said quite casually. Just stay in the hospital with Mom these 2 days. If you want to go to the Su family, I'll go with you when I come back. Okay. Su Qingsang didn't object. With Hua Jinyao there, she thought she would be much calmer and calmer. Wife. Listen to me. With me here, don't do anything you don't want to do in the future. Don't see people you don't want to see. It's okay. What a willful thing to say. But living in this world, how could people really do as they pleased? Not to mention anything else, the Su family had raised her. No matter what reason Su Qinghui had for telling the Li family that she was Xiang Caiping's daughter, it was a fact that he had raised her. Now, she hoped that Su Qinghui would one day tell her the answer, tell her who her biological mother was. Really? With me here, I won't let anything happen to you. Don't you trust me? Yes. I trust you. In fact, in the 6 months that she had been with Hua Jinyao, she really hadn't been wronged. It was almost 1:00 in the morning when Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao talked on the phone. The fireworks were all gone, and the surroundings were quiet. Su Qingsang quietly returned to the ward. In the morning, Xiang Caiping woke up earlier than Su Qingsang. She was already awake when Su Qingsang got up. Morning. Su Qingsang quickly got up. Happy New Year. Mom. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Qingsang and waved at her. Come. This is for you. She took out a red envelope from under her pillow. Happy New Year. Mom, what are you doing? New Year's money. I should have given it to you yesterday, but I forgot. Xiang Kaiping said this with a look of self-blame on her face. Thank you, Mom. I'm already so old. I don't need this. But Su Qingsang was very touched. She grew up in the Su family, so she naturally had New Year's money. But how could the annual routine transfer of money compare to this red packet? Don't be so polite. Xiang Kaiping smiled. I didn't give you any before, but I'll make it up to you in the future. When I have a grandson, I'll give him New Year's money every year. That's good. Take care of yourself. Let me thank you on his behalf. You. After breakfast, the first person to visit Xiang Kaiping was Sua Hongchen. He was a doctor, so he didn't have to be so particular. The second one to arrive was Shi Mengwan. Su Qingsang didn't expect her to come so early. You child. Why did you come to the hospital on New Year's Eve? Xiang Kaiping rebuked. You could have come back in a few days. Auntie, it's fine. I don't believe in that. As Shi Mengwan spoke, she put down the gift in her hand. I have a good relationship with Qingsang. It's not a taboo. Good boy. They are all good kids. Someone came to visit Xiang Kaiping, and the ward became much livelier. A few doctors who were familiar with Su Qingsang and were also assigned to be on duty had come over to see Xiang Kaiping. In this way, there was a festive atmosphere. Su Qingsang had to be on duty and couldn't stay in the ward all the time. She was happy to have someone to accompany Xiang Kaiping. When it was almost time for dinner, Su Qingsang handed over her work and hurried to the ward. To her surprise, she saw Su Qinghui again. He stood outside the ward, obviously wanting to go in, but for some reason, he stopped there. Dad. No matter how much Su Qingsang criticized Su Qinghui in her heart, she didn't show it on her face. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Su Qinghui said this unnaturally. He cleared his throat and looked in the direction of the ward. Your mother, my mother is recovering well. After the new year, let the doctor check her again. Then she can be discharged. During this period of time, Su Qingsang and the caregivers had taken good care of Xiang Kaiping. Her recovery was better than the doctor had expected. After leaving the hospital, she only needed to do some rehabilitation. After that, she would slowly return to normal, at least like a normal person. Su Qinghui had just said the word I when Su Qingsang interrupted him. Dad. I beg you, I'm begging you. Don't go in to see my mother. Xiang Kaiping absolutely didn't want to see Su Qinghui on New Year's Eve. That was definitely not a good thing. Su Qinghui's expression was a little ugly. Qingsang, I hope you remember that I am your father. I know you are my father. Su Qingsang nodded. So what? My mother doesn't want to see you. Can you be a little kinder and let my mother go? Can you? Su Qinghui's face turned green. He stared at Su Qingsang for a while and said, I just want to wish her a happy new year. No need. Su Qingsang really didn't think it was necessary. My mother can still have a good new year if she doesn't see you. If she sees you, I'm afraid she won't have a good new year. Chapter 4:16. How was that nonsense? Su Qingsang was speechless at the accusation. That's the truth. Su Qingsang didn't think she was wrong. My mother really doesn't want to see you. So, please. Su Qinghui had a lot of things to do on the first day of the new year. He had to go back to the Su family later, so he took some time to visit Xiang Kaiping. He didn't expect Su Qingsang to be so determined. She wouldn't even let him see Xiang Kaiping. Qingsang, you have no right to make decisions for your mother. Why don't I? I know very well that my mother doesn't want you. You know very well that you're not. Yes, I'm not. I didn't. Su Qingsang interrupted him. Then who did it? Dad, are you sure you want to argue with me in front of my mother's ward on the first day of the new year? Are you sure? Su Qinghui didn't say anything. He looked at the ward. Dad. Su Qingsang looked at Su Qinghui and suddenly said, I don't understand something. Can you explain it to me? Su Qinghui looked at her and didn't say anything. Since you don't love Auntie so much, why don't you divorce her? Su Qingsang raised her eyebrows. Her face, which looked like Su Qinghui's, was a bit confused. If she really didn't like Li Qianxue and couldn't forget Xiang Kaiping, why didn't she divorce him? What nonsense are you talking about? Su Qinghui's expression changed. I think it's nonsense. If you are really in so much pain and suffering, you can divorce Auntie and leave her. With your ability, even without the Li family, I believe you can still make a name for yourself. If you're single today, you're not married. I won't stop you from seeing my mother. But Dad, you're not. You're married. You have a wife and a family. Yet, you came here to see my mother. Don't you think you're too much? Su Qingsang wanted to say that it was too shameless. But the man standing was her father after all. She couldn't say it out loud. You. What do you know? You don't know anything at all. Of course, Su Qinghui believed in his ability. He also believed that even without the Li family, he could still make a name for himself. Yes. I don't understand. Maybe I'm too young. Su Qingsang sighed in her heart. I only know that. If it were me, I would never allow Hua Jinyao to have feelings for another woman while we are still married. I didn't. Su Qingsang didn't believe him at all, but he still said, I just want to know how your mother is doing. Ever since Su Peijian's incident, he had been feeling guilty and blamed himself. He did feel some regret, but that emotion was suppressed by him. My mother is doing very well. You don't have to come. Speaking of this, Su Qingsang sighed deeply. Dad, I know it's hard for you to believe me, but I still have to tell you that even if I'm not my mother's biological daughter, I will take good care of her. Don't worry. After saying that, Su Qingsang turned around and went back to the ward to see Kaiping. Su Qinghui looked at Su Qingsang's back. His steps were firm and steady. When she spoke just now, her tone was calm and determined. He knew that what she said was true. His daughter had grown up in a place where he couldn't see her. Su Qinghui looked at Su Qingsang's back as she walked away. Suddenly, he felt even more guilty than he had ever felt for Kaiping. Su Qinghui turned around and slowed down his steps. He looked outside. It was the first day of the new year, and the weather was good. The sun shone on him, making him feel warm. Su Qinghui didn't feel warm, and his face showed a blank expression. When he walked out of the hospital, he saw a familiar figure. Li Qianxue. He didn't know when she came. She stood at the entrance of the hospital from afar and stared at him coldly. Su Qinghui suddenly felt guilty. He stood there and didn't move. There were two people, one at the entrance of the hospital building, and the other at the gate of the hospital wall. They looked at each other across the lawn of the hospital. He saw Li Qianxue curl up the corners of her mouth mockingly. She looked at him coldly and sharply, but also with disappointment and understanding. He thought that Li Qianxue would rush over, question him, and scold him. In the end, she didn't. She just looked at him, then turned around, got in the car, and drove away. Su Qinghui raised his foot, but in the end, he stopped. The sunshine of the new year suddenly became a little dazzling. The next day, Su Qingsang made an appointment with a few doctors to visit the homes of a few hospital leaders. Then, she went to Shi Mengwan's house. As for the Su family, she planned to visit them on the third day of the new year. Hua Jinyao would come back on the third day, but she didn't know when he would arrive. If he came back in the afternoon, then she would go to the Su family alone. When Su Qingsang saw Hua Jinyao in the ward, she was shocked. "Why are you back?" "Yes." Hua Jinyao nodded with a smile. "What's wrong? Are you unhappy?" Su Qingsang shook her head. Suddenly, she took 2 steps forward and hugged Hua Jinyao. "You're so bad. I thought you wouldn't arrive until tomorrow. I missed you, so I came back early. Those social engagements were really boring. Especially this year, Hua Yangyuan came. God knew how many people came to visit him for the new year. He didn't have the patience for these things. After flying to his great-aunt's house early in the morning, he had lunch and directly booked a plane ticket to Lin City. He hugged her a little tightly. They had been separated for more than 10 days. He really missed her. Su Qingsang felt the same. Smelling the familiar scent on his body, she inexplicably had an urge to cry. Her eyes were red, and the tip of her nose was sour. It didn't matter that she had spent the new year alone in the past, but this year, because of Hua Jinyao, she felt that she missed him very much and wanted him to be by her side. "I missed you too." Su Qingsang blinked her eyes and suppressed her excitement. She rubbed her face in Hua Jinyao's arms. Hua Jinyao held her up, lowered his head, and kissed the top of her head. Su Qingsang was still feeling affectionate, but she instantly came back to herself when she heard the laughter next to her. Only then did she realize that she was in the ward. Not only was Xiang Kaiping in the ward, but little Yu was also in the ward. Her face immediately turned red, and she quickly moved away from Hua Jinyao's arms with a beautiful blush on her face. She glared at Hua Jinyao. Her gaze looked fierce, but in fact, it was not lethal at all. Hua Jinyao even pulled her back into his arms. "Mom." He brought Su Qingsang to the bedside. "Happy New Year." "Good, good." Xiang Kaiping was really happy to see her son-in-law. "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. Mom." Hua Jinyao turned around to pick up the gifts on the ground that he had put down because he saw Su Qingsang. "I brought you some things. These will be useful in the future." Su Qingsang looked at the pile of gift boxes and packaging. She was a little touched by Hua Jinyao's kindness. He knew that Xiang Kaiping was not her biological mother, but he still did this. It was really rare. "You child. Look at you. It's good that you're back. Why did you buy me things?" Xiang Kaiping said with some blame. She had saved some money in her early years. She really didn't want her daughter and son-in-law to spend too much on her. "Mom, just keep them. These are all good things. They are all internal supplies. Ordinary people can't buy them even if they want to." Hua Jinyao looked indifferent. "I've asked the doctor. These are good for your recovery." Xiang Kaiping knew that this son-in-law was capable, and that these things were nothing to him, but she was very touched by his kindness. She didn't refuse anymore and asked Su Qingsang to put the things away. In her heart, she decided that after she was discharged from the hospital, she must recover as soon as possible. She couldn't be a burden to Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang. With Hua Jinyao around, Xiang Kaiping was much more energetic. She pulled Hua Jinyao and talked for a long time. Hua Jinyao was not impatient. He accompanied Xiang Kaiping patiently and listened to her ramble for a long time. In the end, little Yu winked at Xiang Kaiping, and she remembered. She hadn't seen her daughter and son-in-law for more than 10 days. Okay. Don't worry about me, an old woman." Xiang Kaiping pretended to be annoyed and said, "Go back. Go do what you need to do. The young couple hasn't seen each other for more than 10 days. If you want to be tired of each other, go do it." "Mom." Su Qingsang blushed. "What are you talking about? Did I say something wrong?" "Mom. I'll accompany you today." "I don't want you to accompany me. I have little Yu. Hurry up and go." Xiang Kaiping waved her hand. The noise is giving me a headache. Okay. Hua Jinmiao didn't know how to be polite at all. He put his arm around Su Qingsang's waist and said, "Then I'll take Qingsang back first. Go. Be careful on the road." Su Qingsang couldn't help but reach out to pinch Hua Jinmiao's arm. Unfortunately, his arm was too strong, and she couldn't pinch it. As soon as they got home, Hua Jinmiao pulled Su Qingsang into his arms, turned around, and pressed her against the door. He lowered his head and kissed her deeply. Su Qingsang didn't expect him to be so impatient. She couldn't help but raise her hand to push him. However, her hands were easily restrained by Hua Jinmiao behind her. He carried her and went straight to the room. Their lips didn't separate for a moment. Seeing that her clothes were taken off one by one, Su Qingsang was a little anxious. You haven't showered yet. I'll shower later." Hua Jinmiao didn't give her a chance to refuse. He easily pressed her down on the bed and reached out to grab her feet. "What are you doing?" Su Qingsang was frightened by him. He had his back to her, and she couldn't see his movements clearly for a moment. However, she suddenly felt something cold on her feet. There seemed to be some kind of metal buckle on her feet. Hua Jinmiao stepped back with a naughty smile on his face. He raised her feet for her to see. "Does it look good?" It was a very thin but very delicate anklet. It was made of platinum, and there were small leaves on it. The shape of the leaves was very delicate, and there was a small bell in the middle of the chain. Su Qingsang could almost hear the bell ring as soon as her feet moved. A New Year's gift." Hua Jinmiao's hand gently touched the small bell on the anklet. "Do you like it?" Su Qingsang's feet were very white, and the anklet made her anklet look even more beautiful and delicate. "We doctors are not allowed to wear jewelry," Su Qingsang said dryly. However, Hua Jinmiao took the opportunity to pull her feet down and easily pressed them on her body. His feet wrapped around hers. "It's okay. We only wear it at home." As he spoke, he put his face close to her ear and lowered his voice, which sounded especially magnetic. "Only in bed." Su Qingsang felt heat from her ankles to the top of her head. She bit her lip and looked at him angrily. What are you thinking about in your head?" "I'm thinking about you." Hua Jinmiao pinched her chin as he spoke. "Can I be thinking about someone else?" Who knows?" Her mind was full of improper thoughts. Thinking of this, she gently pushed him away. "Go down." As expected, Hua Jinmiao went down. Su Qingsang blinked. She didn't seem to have used so much strength just now, did she? However, Hua Jinmiao came back very quickly. He was holding another set of underwear that she had bought in Japan. "I've already given you my New Year's gift. Now, it's your turn to give me your New Year's gift." "I don't want it. Once was enough." Did he want to do it again? Su Qingsang wanted to hide, but how could she hide from Hua Jinmiao? Soon, Su Qingsang, who was dressed as a bunny girl, was successfully captured by Hua Jinmiao in his arms. That night, apart from her own voice and Hua Jinmiao's voice, Su Qingsang could only hear the sound of the anklet on her ankle. It kept ringing, ringing, ringing. On the third day of the new year, the weather was not as sunny as the previous 2 days. It was a little gloomy. When Su Qingsang got up in the morning, she was a little embarrassed when she thought of the nonsense she had with Hua Jinmiao the day before. Hua Jinmiao had endured it for too long these days, hadn't he? He was so heavy-handed. Not at all. Su Qingsang patted her face and quickly calmed herself down. She still had a task today. She got up and told Hua Jinmiao that she was going to visit the Su family today. Hua Jinmiao didn't object. "Okay. Anyway, I've prepared the gift. Let's go directly." Su Qingsang nodded. She really wasn't very enthusiastic about going to the Su family. Seeing this, Hua Jinmiao rubbed her head and messed up her hair. "If you really don't want to go, don't go. It's okay. How can I not go?" Su Qingsang blinked. It's okay. We'll come back soon. Since Hua Jinyao said that he had prepared the gift, Su Qingsang naturally believed him. When they arrived at the Su family, old Master Li had already gotten up and was playing chess with Su Yusen. Su Chenghui and Li Qianxue hadn't gotten up yet. Seeing Hua Jinyao, old Master Li was a little emotional. This outstanding young man could be said to be a member of his family, but he didn't marry Su Peijian. Instead, he married Su Qingsang. It would be a lie to say that he didn't regret it. However, everything had its own fate. It couldn't be forced. Old Master, Happy New Year. Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao wished Old Master Li and Su Yusen each other. Happy New Year. Old Master Li looked at Hua Jinyao. You're here at the right time. Come and play chess with me. Yusen, go upstairs and call your father down. Chapter 4:17. In fact, the atmosphere at home had been a little gloomy for the past 2 days. Perhaps it was because Su Peijian wasn't in the country. Li Qianxue's expression had been ugly the whole time. She didn't look like she was celebrating the new year. Instead, she looked like someone owed her money. Even old Master Li could see that something was wrong with her. However, since Li Qianxue didn't say anything, old Master Li couldn't say anything. Young people had their own things to do. As parents, it was not appropriate for them to interfere too much. Old Master Li had been worried about Li Qianxue for a long time. He was getting on in years and really didn't want to worry about his children anymore. Li Qianxue had a headache early in the morning. She hid in her room and was unwilling to go out. In the morning, 2 families came to pay their New Year's greetings. The other party's status was lower than the Su family's, so she didn't need to entertain them much. After seeing them off, she went back to sleep. However, when she saw Su Chenghui, she looked a little annoyed. She was annoyed to see Su Chenghui. No, not annoyed. His heart was cold. Her heart was so cold that she didn't want to be with this man anymore. Su Chenghui had just come out of the bathroom. When he saw Li Qianxue, he was stunned for a moment. Recently, the relationship between the two of them had been particularly tense. Ever since Li Qianxue bumped into him at the hospital on the first day of the new year, Li Qianxue hadn't said a word to him. It was supposed to be the new year, a lively time, but the two of them didn't say a word at home. Even when there were guests in the house, Li Qianxue could still smile at them, but when it came to him, she immediately looked at him coldly. At night, the two of them slept on one side of the bed. However, for the past 2 days, Li Qianxue had taken out a blanket and slept on the other side of the bed. Just like now, when she returned to her room to rest, she saw that his gaze was fixed on the bed. She turned around and walked in the other direction. There was a custom-made Italian chaise longue in the room. Li Qianxue took a blanket from the closet and laid on it, planning to take another nap. Before he could fall asleep, he heard the sound of a car outside the courtyard. She was a little annoyed. That was how it was during the new year. There were a lot of people who came to visit, and there was no time for peace. In the past, she didn't feel tired dealing with these people and things. Not long after, Su Yusen came up. Mom? Dad? Su Yusen looked at his parents in the room and sighed deeply in his heart. No one didn't want their family to be harmonious, and no one didn't want their parents to love each other. But at some point, Su Yusen knew that this was just an extravagant hope. Big sister, brother-in-law is here. Zhenren Su Pei was not in the country, so she naturally referred to Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao. Li Qianxue had already woken up when Su Yusen entered the room. She glanced at Su Chenghui and found that he was sitting still. She smiled sarcastically. What? Your most precious daughter is here to pay you a New Year's visit. Aren't you going to hurry downstairs and entertain her? Su Chenghui didn't look too good. Li Qianxue glanced at Su Yusen and said, I have a headache. I want to sleep a little longer. After saying this, she lay down again. Su Yusen felt a little helpless and couldn't help but look at Su Chenghui. No matter how much he didn't want to see Su Qingsang, he had to go downstairs. Downstairs, Hua Jinyao and Old Master Li were playing chess. Su Qingsang was sitting next to them and watching. She didn't know much about chess, but she could see that the game was in a stalemate. However, seeing Old Master Li frowning and thinking carefully, while Hua Jinyao seemed to be unconcerned, Su Qingsang felt that Hua Jinyao seemed to be more relaxed. When she saw Su Qinghui again, Su Qingsang's feelings were very complicated. In her heart, Su Qinghui was obviously a scumbag, but such a scumbag was her father. Dad. Dad. Hua Jinyao also stopped playing chess and stood up to pay a New Year's visit to Su Qinghui. Su Qinghui nodded slightly, not showing much enthusiasm on his face. Su Qingsang wasn't surprised by his attitude at all. If Su Qinghui was warm and considerate to her one day, it would really be a strange thing. Hua Jinyao went back to play chess with Old Master Li. After a few rounds, Old Master Li admitted defeat. The new generation excels the old. The younger generation really surpasses the older one. Old Master Li's face was full of admiration. He really appreciated Hua Jinyao as a young man. You flatter me, Old Master. Hua Jinyao smiled faintly. Speaking of which, my grandfather loves to play chess. I just play with him a lot. Hua Jinyao was playing chess with Old Master Li, while Su Yusen was chatting with Su Qingsang. Su Qinghui, on the other hand, became the extra one. He didn't seem to care. No one knew what he was thinking, but he was a little lost in thought. When it was almost lunchtime, Li Qianxue came downstairs. She had slept, and her complexion was a little better. Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang stood up to pay a New Year's visit to her. Li Qianxue's reaction was very cold. Su Qingsang had long been used to Li Qianxue's attitude, so she wasn't sad. Su Yusen looked at Su Qingsang, his eyes a little apologetic. Su Qingsang smiled at him, not taking it seriously. Li Qianxue noticed her son's gaze, and the expression on her face became more and more unpleasant. Her husband was on Su Qingsang's side, and now even her son was on Su Qingsang's side. She felt that there was a lump in her heart. She couldn't go up or down. This kind of feeling was so uncomfortable that she left before the others finished eating. Old Master Li felt helpless about his daughter's increasingly abnormal behavior. Fortunately, Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang didn't care about this matter. After all, it wasn't someone they cared about, so their attitude didn't matter. After eating, Su Qingsang was going to leave. However, when she saw Su Qinghui, she couldn't help but want to ask who her biological mother was. Hua Jinyao seemed to know what she was thinking. He held her hand and said, "I'll go." Su Qingsang bit her lip and looked at Hua Jinyao in surprise. Hua Jinyao? Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. After saying this, Hua Jinyao asked Su Qingsang to accompany Old Master Li and Su Yusen to chat. He used business as an excuse to call Su Qinghui into the study. Su Qinghui didn't understand what business it was that needed to be discussed on such a big day like the New Year. However, Hua Jinyao had gone to Rome City before, so there might be a new project or something else. The two of them entered the study, and the servant left after serving 2 cups of tea. Su Qinghui looked at Hua Jinyao, waiting for him to take the initiative to speak. Hua Jinyao picked up the tea in front of him and took a sip, then clicked his tongue and said, "Isn't this Longjing tea before the rain? It's a bit of a waste to make it like this." Su Qinghui didn't speak. Old Master Li liked tea, so he asked someone to make some. As for how to make it, he actually didn't like tea very much, and he usually didn't pay much attention to it. However, when Old Master Li was free, he would make his own tea. "You just said that business, it's not business." Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qinghui. He could roughly tell that Su Qinghui had been in a strange state recently. "Actually, I have something personal to tell you." Chapter 418. Seeing that Su Qinghui was playing dumb, Hua Jinyao went straight to the point. Who is Qingsang's biological mother? Su Qinghui was stunned. He didn't expect Hua Jinyao to ask this question. Or maybe he had guessed it, but he didn't expect Hua Jinyao to say it directly. What nonsense are you talking about? Qingsang's biological mother is Kaiping. Hua Jinyao curled his lips, and the smile on his face was sarcastic. He put down the teacup in his hand, sat up straight, and looked at Su Qinghui. Is it interesting? Hua Jinyao. Su Qinghui closed his eyes and suppressed the trace of displeasure in his heart. Is it interesting? How can you say such things in front of me? Who are you to question me? Qingsang's husband, Hua Jinyao, said confidently. I don't want to see Qingsang worry, so please tell me, Dad, who is Qingsang's biological mother? No one. This was the last thing Su Qinghui wanted to talk about. I'll only say it once, no one. Really? Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qinghui and nodded hard. Actually, Dad, have you ever thought that the more you try to hide it, the more we think you're guilty? Hua Jinyao. Su Qinghui was exasperated. I'm your father-in-law. You'd better watch your attitude. Of course I know you're my father-in-law. But do you think what you've done is what a qualified father should be? When Hua Jinyao said this, his voice became quite rude. All these years, have you cared for Qingsang? All these years, have you cared for her feelings? You can't even give her an answer. What makes you think that you can be called a qualified father-in-law? Su Qinghui didn't say anything. He knew these things. But he just forced himself not to think about it. This is between me and Qingsang. It has nothing to do with you. I've also said that I'm Qingsang's husband. Her business is my business. I'll say it again. I don't have an answer to give you. You don't have an answer because you have a guilty conscience. Because you want to protect the woman you really love. Hua Jinyao's eyes were sharp. His deep eyes were like sharp swords, pointing straight at Su Qinghui's heart. Am I right? Nonsense. Su Qinghui's face turned green. Who gave you the right to make such wild guesses? Is this nonsense? Hua Jinyao sneered and stared at Su Qinghui's face. You said that you love Xiang Kaiping, but you are so cold to her daughter. To put it bluntly, it was because Qingsang was not Xiang Caiping's daughter. But whose daughter was she? Who is the other woman? Hua Jinyao thought of his previous deduction. I figured it out later. That woman should have an extraordinary family background. But it was still not enough to contend against the Li clan. In order to protect her, you treated her daughter as Xiang Caiping's daughter and raised her by your side. Right? No. Su Qinghui's defense was weak. Admit it. Your expression betrays you. Why did that woman give birth to Qingsang and not want her? Could it be that, to a large extent, her identity did not allow her to acknowledge this child? Otherwise, why would you have such an attitude? When Hua Jinyao said this, he vaguely felt that something didn't seem to make sense. However, this result was the closest to the answer after his discussion with Su Qingsang. Hua Jinyao. I said, don't talk nonsense. There is no such thing. Su Qinghui had strong self-control for so many years, but at this time, he could not help but be affected by Hua Jinyao's words. I guessed it right, so you are angry? Hua Jinyao sat up straight. Why don't you be more honest and tell me who Qingsang's biological mother is? I can promise you. We just want to know the answer. After we know, we will not destroy the other party's original life. Su Qinghui's expression was very ugly. He stared at Hua Jinyao's face, as if he wanted to burn a hole in his body. Have you said enough? If you have, please get out. In fact, have you ever thought that it is useless for you to hide it? After all, we can actually find out who the women you were in contact with back then. It just takes a little time. Hua Jinyao. Su Qinghui stood up and slammed the table. I'll say it again. Get out. Get out. Hua Jinmiao did not stand up because of his anger. The expression on his face did not even change at all. He just looked at Su Qinghui, with a faint mockery in his eyes. You didn't tell me because you don't believe that I can find out? Su Qinghui did not want to listen to him anymore, nor did he want to endure it anymore. He stood up and walked in the direction of the door. Then, he quickly pulled open the door of the study. Hua Jinmiao, get out. After saying this, his gaze suddenly fell on Li Qianxue, who was standing outside the door. She stood there, expressionless. He didn't know if she had just arrived or if she had been standing there for a long time. Su Qinghui's face suddenly changed like a palette that had been knocked over. It turned green, red, white, and black. Li Qianxue's expression did not change at all. She only looked at Hua Jinmiao. Hua Jinmiao, what did you just say? Hua Jinmiao narrowed his eyes and looked at Li Qianxue. He was not sure what she would do if she knew about this. Hua Jinmiao. Li Qianxue did not look at Su Qinghui at all. She just stared at Hua Jinmiao. What did you just say? Say it again. There was no answer. There was no sound. The study was extremely quiet. Li Qianxue took a step forward and entered the study. Su Qinghui subconsciously raised his hand, instinctively wanting to stop Li Qianxue. However, she had already walked in and stood in front of Hua Jinmiao. Hua Jinmiao, speak. Auntie? Hua Jinmiao frowned slightly. He seemed to be a little dissatisfied that he did not notice that someone was approaching and eavesdropping outside the door. It was true that he wanted to help Su Qingsang find her biological mother, but he did not want to destroy Su Qingsang's peaceful life. Su Qingsang is not Xiang Caiping's child? Then whose child is it? Li Qianxue had only heard a general idea, but she still needed more information. Tell me, who is that woman? Auntie, I don't know either. Looking at Li Qianxue's gloomy face, Hua Jinmiao inexplicably felt a headache. Things seemed to be out of control. You don't know? Li Qianxue's eyes were as sharp as knives. After glancing at his face, she quickly turned and looked at Su Qinghui behind her. He doesn't know? You don't know either? Chapter 419. The atmosphere in the study was almost strange. Su Qinghui didn't move. He just watched Li Qianxue walk toward him step by step and then stand in front of him. Who is that woman? Her face was calm, without sorrow or joy. She had always thought that the person Su Qinghui loved was Xiang Caiping. He had not forgotten about her for so many years. However, other than her and Xiang Caiping, Su Qinghui had another woman. What did that mean? Li Qianxue doubted herself more than once. She doubted that her love for so many years was just a joke. However, she refused to give up. She kept thinking that it would be fine as long as she could endure it. She always thought that as long as she got through it, until Su Qinghui gave up and stopped thinking about that woman, he would always see the good in her. However, she didn't expect that she wouldn't be able to last until Su Qinghui gave up and forgot about that woman. It turned out that Su Qinghui had another woman. Su Qinghui looked at the fierce look in Li Qianxue's eyes and felt guilty again. He could only try to calm down. There's no such woman. You heard wrong. I'm not deaf. Li Qianxue looked at Su Qinghui. The sarcasm in her eyes was obvious. And you didn't close the door properly. Her voice was very calm, but one could faintly hear the anger contained in it. Su Qinghui lowered his head and avoided eye contact with Li Qianxue. There are no other women. You really misheard me. This was the first time Su Qinghui had spoken to Li Qianxue in such a low voice. His voice was full of helplessness. However, Li Qianxue only pretended to be guilty and tried to cover up. She took a step forward and stood in front of Su Qinghui. Her body was less than 10 centimeters away from him. She stared into his eyes. Su Qinghui. Who was Su Qingsang's mother? Who else could it be if not Xiang Caiping? No one. No one? Are you reproducing asexually? You conjured a child out of thin air? Li Qianxue was utterly disappointed in Su Chenghui. For more than 20 years, she had loved him until she was powerless and exhausted. Now, she was desperate and disappointed. He was truly disappointed. I told you. There are no other women. Li Qianxue stared at Su Chenghui's face. She closed her eyes and asked again, who is Su Qingsang's mother? Tell me. Hua Jinyao didn't expect things to turn out like this. As the son-in-law of Li Qianxue and Su Chenghui, it was obviously not suitable for him to stay any longer. He glanced at Su Chenghui and then at Li Qianxue. Although the two of them did not speak, the atmosphere was tense. He didn't even say goodbye to Su Chenghui and quietly left the study. Downstairs, Su Qingsang was still waiting for him to give her an answer. Hua Jinyao looked at her and shook his head almost imperceptibly. Su Qingsang understood. The two of them said goodbye to old Master Li and left. Su Yusen looked at Hua Jinyao's face and instinctively told him that something bad had happened. In the study, Li Qianxue was still questioning Su Chenghui. However, no matter what, Su Chenghui would not admit it, let alone tell Li Qianxue the answer. I said, there is no other woman. You heard wrong. Li Qianxue didn't want to ask any more. She raised her hand and almost slapped him in the face. Su Chenghui's face was slapped away by her. He looked at Li Qianxue and moved his lips, but he didn't say a word. Li Qianxue suddenly smiled. She looked at Su Chenghui and smiled while nodding heavily. Su Chenghui. Let's get a divorce. This was the second time Li Qianxue mentioned the word divorce. Su Chenghui was stunned for a moment and instinctively refused. I don't agree. It doesn't matter whether you agree or not. Li Qianxue stopped smiling. Her voice was full of exhaustion. It's me now. I have decided to divorce you. Su Chenghui, listen carefully. I want to divorce you. I don't agree. Su Chenghui's voice finally sounded normal. He looked at Li Qianxue with a determined expression. Don't think about it. It's impossible for me to divorce you. Su Chenghui. Li Qianxue gritted her teeth and looked at Su Chenghui. Don't be too shameless. What makes you think that after you betrayed me again and again, I can still be with you without any grudge? I didn't betray you. Su Chenghui knew that Li Qianxue wouldn't believe anything he said at this time, but it was the truth. You didn't betray me? Then where did Su Qingsang come from? Not only did you betray me, but you also betrayed Xiang Kaiping. Su Chenghui. I always thought that you loved Xiang Kaiping. It's been more than 20 years. You pretended to be affectionate, tortured me, and ignored me. I really thought that you were so noble. What a gentleman. So what happened? It turned out that he was just a scumbag, and she spent half of her life for a scumbag. Su Chenghui, I'll say it again. I want a divorce. I'm going to tell my father now. Li Qianxue turned around and was about to leave, but Su Chenghui grabbed her arm. Li Qianxue was caught off guard, and her body was surrounded by Su Chenghui. He looked at the determination on Li Qianxue's face and inexplicably panicked. In order to hide his emotions, Su Chenghui said without thinking, Li Qianxue, I won't divorce you. Why did you get to marry me when you wanted to, and now divorce me when you want to? Dream on. Besides, are you sure you want to divorce now? Su Chenghui looked at her face and said casually, who has been in charge of the Li group all these years? Tell me. What's more, your father's health isn't very good. The doctor said that he can't be agitated. Are you sure you want to tell your father? Su Chenghui, you're despicable. Li Qianxue was furious. She almost wanted to slap Su Chenghui again. Yes, I'm despicable. I also know that I'm despicable. But this despicable man, didn't you want him for yourself? Didn't you love him? Admit it, Li Qianxue. He provoked me first. It was you. He restrained her hand. Su Chenghui was a man. How could she really succeed again? So, I'm going to spend the rest of my life to atone for forcing you to marry me, right? Li Qinshue's voice was already out of control. She stared at Su Chenghui in disbelief. So this man actually thought that way? Su Chenghui wanted to say that he didn't mean that, but he thought of Su Qingsang and Su Peijian. He couldn't argue. In the end, his voice lowered. Li Qinsue, you can make a bigger fuss. Let's see if your father and Yusen will be moved. Su Chenghui knew very well where Li Qinshue's bottom line was. Li Qinsue pushed him hard and took a step back. Su Chenghui, I was really blind back then. After saying this, she didn't say anything else. She turned around and left without looking back. She didn't even look at him out of the corner of her eye. After she left, Su Chenghui took a few steps back weakly and leaned against the desk as if all the strength in his body had been sucked out. His back was covered in a layer of cold sweat. He didn't care about Li Qinshue's anger. He only knew that the secret between Su Peijian and Su Qingsang was temporarily kept. However, he didn't know how long this secret could be kept. Sitting in the car, Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao. He told Su Qingsang about the conversation in the study just now. Su Qingsang frowned as she thought about Su Chenghui's words. He said there's no that woman. He really knows how to cover up his scummy behavior. Even though Su Chenghui was her biological father, Su Qingsang had some resentment towards him now. How could there be such a person? He dared to do it but didn't dare to admit it. Hua Jinyao didn't say anything. He thought about everything that had happened since Yang Kaiping appeared. He felt that something was wrong. Su Qingsang was still guessing the identity of her biological mother. Seeing that Hua Jinyao didn't say anything, she stopped talking. It was the new year, and she was a little depressed. Because of Su Chenghui's hiding and Su Chenghui's scum. Hua Jinyao, do you think we might have guessed wrong? Is it possible that my mother isn't actually a rich young lady? Is it possible that she's just an ordinary person with a mediocre status? Hua Jinyao's thoughts were interrupted by her. He turned his head and looked at her. What do you mean? For example, a prostitute or, Su Qingsang didn't know why she thought that way. I thought about it. I don't think my father could have sex with a third woman in that situation. The most likely reason is that he wanted Auntie Hua and my mother at the same time, so he had an accident when he was out. The so-called accident was actually something like a one-night stand. Su Qingsang didn't want to think about her father in that way, but the situation in front of her was the most likely reason. Then my mother's child happened to have an accident. So my dad brought me back to the Su family. There was a red light in front of them. After Su Qingsang said this possibility, she turned to look at Hua Jinyao, waiting for his approval. Hua Jinyao frowned slightly. He was still thinking about the series of things that had happened since Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping met. He always felt that Su Qingsang's background wasn't as simple as she thought. There must be more to it. On the surface, there seemed to be no problem with Su Qingsang's background, but many details couldn't stand up to scrutiny. He always felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Until he heard about Su Qingsang's identity. Those 4 words seemed to be like a bolt of lightning, cutting through all the problems that he couldn't figure out. He suddenly turned to look at Su Qingsang. His eyes were burning as he stared at Su Qingsang's face. He thought of Su Peijian. She didn't look like Su Chenghui or Li Qinsue. But Su Yusen looked very much like Su Chenghui. Looking at Su Qingsang, if he looked carefully, Su Qingsang and Su Yusen looked more like a brother and sister when they stood together. They both perfectly inherited the advantages of Su Chenghui's facial features. Especially Su Qingsang. If she was the complete female version of Su Chenghui, her facial features would be at most elegant. However, Su Qingsang's eyebrows and eyes were like Su Chenghui's, but the shape of her face was Li Qinsue. Hua Jinyao? What's wrong? The light in front of them was already green, and the horns behind them kept blaring. Su Qingsang looked at him with some worry. Do you think I'm wrong? If not, then so be it. Anyway, it's fine now. No. You're not wrong. But we guessed wrong. Chapter 420. What? The loudspeaker behind her was still blaring. Su Qingsang was a little anxious. Hu Jinmiao, don't think about it. Hurry up and drive. Hu Jinmiao started the car and drove away from the intersection, but his voice was much firmer than before. Honey, I think I might know who your birth mother is. Who? Li Qianxue. Right, why didn't he think of that? It was entirely possible. What did you say? Su Qingsang's eyes widened. For a moment, she looked at Hu Jinmiao as if he were a lunatic. Are you crazy? I'm not crazy. Hu Jinmiao was unprecedentedly calm. It's your father who's crazy. Su Qingsang thought about what he had just said. That's impossible. Honey, listen to me. Hu Jinmiao stopped the car by the side of the road. He turned to look at her with burning eyes. Look, it's entirely possible. Looking at Su Qingsang's incredulous face, Hu Jinmiao put his hands on her shoulders. First, your birthdays are only one day apart from Su Peijian's. Yes, Su Qingsang knew that, but that didn't mean that she was, look. If your father really hated Li Qianxue that much back then. If he hates her so much for forcing him to marry her, he will definitely think of revenge. He had known Su Qinghui for a long time, so he had more or less seen through him. He had the ability, and he didn't particularly care about external things like face. However, there was an air of arrogance about him. He had seen the direction of the Li Group's business in the past few years. Su Qinghui disdained anything that crossed the line. This was also the reason why the Chou family was able to suppress the Su family even though they were clearly inferior to them in the past. That was because Qiu Yanba's father was more ruthless than Su Qinghui. But Su Qinghui was different. He had a bottom line and a sense of pride. He wasn't willing to use some methods that he didn't think were worth mentioning. Because of this, two very important projects of the Li Corporation were later taken away by their enemies. That was why Su Qinghui was willing to marry into the Qiu family. But how? Your father won't do anything that's against the law. She was already married. With a child. Start with the company? In the beginning, he didn't have that ability, and when he had the ability, he didn't bother to do it. If you were your father, what would you do? Su Qingsang blinked, thinking about what Hu Jinmiao had said. She understood the first sentence he said. But every sentence put together, she was unwilling to believe it. I don't believe it. This was impossible. If her biological mother was Li Qianxue, then what about Su Peijian? Who is Su Peijian? That's my point. Hu Jinmiao thought about the information he had gathered from his initial investigation. I think your mother, Xiang Kaiping, had a premature birth and gave birth to you half a month early. However, Li Qianxue also gave birth at this time. Su Qinghui was still holding back, so for him, it was definitely not the time to say it. He might want to wait until the day Li Qianxue gets old. Or... Hu Jinmiao looked at Su Qingsang and said another possibility, Su Peijian got the Li family's property. Everything of the Li family will eventually fall into Su Peijian's hands. That will be the time for your father to tell the truth. Su Qingsang listened to all of Hu Jinmiao's speculation and analysis. She stared at him with her eyes wide open, and her whole body was in a state of emptiness. Is he crazy? He's not crazy. Hu Jinmiao gave Su Qingsang a very definite answer. I think not only is he not crazy, but he is also sober and knows what he is doing. Su Qingsang pursed her lips into a straight line. She looked at the street in the distance, a little confused. It had been sunny for a few days before the new year, but it was cloudy this morning. At this time, the sky was completely gloomy, as if it was going to rain. She turned her face to look at Hu Jinyao. If what you said is true, if I am really Li Qinshue's daughter, then Su Peijian is, yes. Hu Jinyao nodded and gave her a definite answer. Su Qingsang felt weak. She leaned against the car seat and was lost in thought again. She thought of the two conflicts between Xiang Kaiping and Su Peijian. She also thought of Xiang Kaiping making things difficult for Su Qingsang to protect her. If what Hu Jinyao said was true, then wasn't Xiang Kaiping making things difficult for her own daughter to protect Li Qinshue's daughter? She instinctively stood on Xiang Caiping's side, but then she thought of Li Qinshu. What did Li Qinshu do wrong? When Xiang Kaiping left, it could be said that she gave up her daughter. But what about Li Qinshu? She had taken care of Su Peijian since she was born. Take good care of her. Give her the best of everything. If Li Qinshu found out that the daughter she had loved and taken care of for so many years was not her biological daughter, what would she do? What about Xiang Kaiping? Although Xiang Kaiping had not taken care of her daughter for more than 20 years. But if she found out that the daughter she had been protecting was Li Qinshue's child, what would she do? Su Qingsang didn't dare to think about it. She didn't speak, and Hu Jinyao was not in a hurry. He kept looking at her, as if waiting for her decision. Hu Jinyao, what should I do? It's up to you. Hu Jinyao took her hand into his own and wrapped it tightly around his own. When he found that her hand was cold, he frowned and said, if you want to acknowledge Li Qinshu, let's go back to the Su family now and tell them the truth. That's it? What else? Hu Jinyao rubbed her palm and supported her. As long as you want it, it's that simple. But Su Qingsang couldn't convince herself. She couldn't accept it so easily and believe it. What if I'm wrong? There's a 90% chance. Hu Jinyao had just thought about everything. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this was the correct answer. But, Su Qingsang was still a little hesitant. What if Li Qinshu doesn't believe it, or Su Qinghui doesn't admit it? It's simple. Hu Jinyao could see that Su Qingsang didn't believe the answer herself. If Su Qinghui doesn't admit it, we'll do a paternity test. A paternity test was the best proof of the result. They all knew that. As long as the paternity test was out, Su Qinghui couldn't deny it even if he wanted to. Then, what if the test results show that I'm not Li Qinshue's daughter? That doesn't matter. Hu Jinyao squeezed her delicate hand. You're already so big anyway. You don't need Li Qinshu or Su Qinghui. If they want to admit it, they can admit it. If they don't want to admit it, they won't lose anything. But he was sure and confident. Su Qingsang and Su Peijian were more than 90% likely to be swapped. He made it sound simple, but Su Qingsang knew that things weren't that simple. Well, even if it's true. Even if everything you said is true. What about my mother? What about my mother? The mother she was talking about was naturally Kaiping. Speaking of Xiang Kaiping, even Hu Jinyao fell silent. To put it bluntly, he and Su Qingsang were the same. They didn't care much about the Su family. They had the relationship they had now just to maintain their appearances. But Xiang Kaiping was different. She sincerely regarded Su Qingsang as her own daughter. She also sincerely wanted to make up for the lost mother-daughter relationship in the past. Chapter 421. Could she accept it? What would she do? Would Xiang Kaiping accept Su Peijian as her daughter, or would she be disappointed that Su Qingsang wasn't her daughter? The atmosphere in the car was very quiet. Su Qingsang thought about how Xiang Kaiping had taken care of her for the past few months. She really couldn't calmly acknowledge Li Qinshu. Firstly, after so many years, they hadn't developed any feelings for each other. The second reason was for Xiang Kaiping. Xiang Kaiping was still lying on the hospital bed, almost paralyzed. By the way, Su Peijian was also the one who caused Xiang Kaiping to end up like this. If one day, He really revealed the truth, and Xiang Kaiping found out that the person who hurt her was her own daughter. How sad would she be? All of these were the reasons why Su Qingsang didn't want to expose them. She could ignore Su Qinghui, Li Qianxue, and the feelings of the other members of the Su family. However, after spending a few months together, she had no choice but to pay attention to Kaiping. She couldn't bear to hurt Xiang Kaiping. She couldn't do it. Hua Jinyao was still looking at her, waiting for her answer. Su Qingsang sighed in her heart. What other answer could there be? What other answer did he need? Let's go. Let's go to the hospital. Hua Jinyao wasn't surprised by Su Qingsang's words at all. If she could reconcile with Li Qianxue so easily, she wouldn't be Su Qingsang. All right. Let's go to the hospital. Hua Jinyao. The moment he started the car, Su Qingsang suddenly spoke. He stopped to look at her and saw that she was still staring at the road ahead. Let's put an end to this matter. Wife? My mother is Xiang Kaiping. There's no Li Qianxue or anyone else. There's no revenge, and there's no conspiracy. Hua Jinyao was stunned for a moment. He was not surprised that Su Qingsang had made this decision. However, he also knew that this was a difficult decision. But she still did it, and in such a short period of time. Wife. Do you really know what you're giving up? Everything of the Li family, everything of the Su family. She was an honorable young lady. Not to mention anything else, because of the recent cooperation with the Tianyu region, the Li clan was now faintly superior to the Qiu clan. The stock price kept rising, and so did the company's market value. Su Qingsang gave up without a second thought. I know. Su Qingsang turned to look at him. I know what I've given up. I have no regrets. Without Li Qianxue, she still had Xiang Kaiping. Without the Li family, she still had Hua Jinyao. She didn't need too many things like money. Yes or no, it was all the same to her. Hua Jinyao reached out and pulled her into his arms. He hugged her tightly. Let's go. Otherwise, it would be too late. Mom will be worried if she keeps waiting. All right. Hua Jinyao let go of her hand and went to start the car. Su Qingsang looked at the scenery outside the car window and thought of a scene from her childhood. Su Peijian was held by Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue kept calling her baby. At that time, she longed for it very much. She really wanted to let Li Qianxue hug her like that. However, Li Qianxue gave her a cold look and put on a completely different expression than when she was facing Su Peijian. She said, I'm not your mother. At that time, she was sad, but she didn't hate Li Qianxue at all. The older she grew, the more she understood, and the less she hated Li Qianxue. She even faintly sympathized with her. No woman would be willing to raise a child that her husband had with someone else, not to mention that this child was under her nose every day. She had never hated Li Qianxue. Even when she came to the hospital to cause trouble for her last time, she didn't. She tried to understand Li Qianxue's situation again and empathize with her hard work. Wasn't this a kind of mother-daughter relationship? Su Qingsang's head hurt a little. She knew that no matter how much she doubted Hua Jinyao's words on the surface, deep down, she had already believed it. Because she was with Xiang Kaiping, no matter how she looked for or how she got along with her. She was touched and grateful, but she didn't have the kind of intimacy that came from the depths of her heart. However, she once had that kind of feeling for Li Qianxue. When she was young, she always wanted to get close to Li Qianxue for no reason. Even if Li Qianxue kept giving her a cold shoulder. She always tried her best. At that time, Su Peijian's sarcastic words were indeed true to her. She used to really want Li Qianxue to give her some care and some love. In the past, she only thought that she envied Su Peijian for having a mother, but why didn't she think about asking for Su Qinghui's attention? Su Qingsang closed her eyes and thought of another thing. Since Li Qianxue didn't know, she would let her not know. She would let her treat Su Peijian as her own daughter and continue like this. Otherwise, if she knew, she would probably break down. As for Su Qinghui, she naturally had a way to make him shut up and not say anything. What are you thinking about? Nothing. Su Qingsang shook her head. When she met Hua Jinyao's somewhat worried gaze, she sighed faintly and said, Hua Jinyao, I think, since Li Qianxue doesn't know, let her not know. Since she had decided to let everything go on like this, she would even hide it from Li Qianxue. It's also a good choice to let her live her life without knowing anything. This was a repayment to Li Qianxue for bringing her into this world. Hua Jinyao understood what she meant. While driving, he reached out and held Su Qingsang's hand. Okay. Thank you, Hua Jinyao. The word thank you is too light. Why don't you give yourself to me tonight as a thank you gift? Okay. Su Qingsang didn't refuse. She also needed Hua Jinyao. She needed something to make her forget the shock she had experienced today. When they arrived at the hospital, Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao didn't reveal anything. In fact, it was the easiest thing to hide from Xiang Kaiping. As usual, they talked and laughed to make Xiang Kaiping happy. When she was tired and wanted to sleep, they said goodbye and went home. Xiang Caiping's body was recovering well. After the Lantern Festival, she could be discharged from the hospital. At that time, she only needed to come back for regular checkups and do good rehabilitation. Su Qingsang got into the car, and the smile on her face was gone. She was in a daze all the way home. When she entered the door, she finally reached out and hugged Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao, I feel terrible. She could let everything stay the way it was. She could not recognize Li Qianxue and could continue to treat Xiang Kaiping as her own mother. But all of this couldn't hide the pain and discomfort in her heart. Hua Jinyao didn't say anything. He held her slender body tightly in his arms. If you want to cry, you can cry. No. You can't cry when you're really upset. Su Qingsang closed her eyes. She felt her eyes were wet and hot, but she didn't want to cry. How could he do this? How could he do this? If he didn't want me, he could have asked her to abort me. If he really wanted to take revenge, he could have not married her. She didn't say it clearly, but Hua Jinyao knew that she was referring to Li Qianxue. But he married her, and then he treated her like this. We can hide everything. But I really suddenly feel that. She's so pitiful. Some things couldn't stand thinking about. When Su Qingsang was with Xiang Kaiping, she could still maintain a smile on her face. But when they separated, she only felt terrible. He's so cruel. Su Qingsang tightened her grip on Hua Jinyao's shirt. She used a lot of force. How could he be so cruel? Hua Jinyao didn't know what he could say. In fact, he also looked down on Su Qinghui and couldn't forgive him for what he did. Didn't he think that if she found out one day, she would break down and go crazy? Or, he knew it, but he still did it. Hua Jinyao, I didn't hate him before. But now, I really hate him. Really. She didn't mind that Su Qinghui didn't like her, ignored her, or treated her coldly. She just thought that she was unlucky. But if she was really Li Qianxue's daughter, then Su Qinghui was really cruel. His actions were the most vicious revenge in the world for a proud person like Li Qianxue. I really hate him. Hua Jinyao, do you understand? I hate him. Hua Jinyao pressed his chin against the top of her head and kissed her hair. Don't think about it. Really. Don't think about it. If she finds out, what will she do? This was not only because Li Qianxue was her biological mother, but also because he couldn't bear to stand in the shoes of a woman. Honey, don't think about it. Hua Jinyao lowered his head to kiss her. Haven't you already decided? Then don't think about it. Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang raised her head and put her arms around his neck. Kiss me. She didn't want to think about it anymore. She wanted to forget everything that had happened before. She wanted to forget everything. Okay. Hua Jinyao picked her up and gave her a deep kiss. At the same time, he carried her back to the room. It was an extremely passionate night. Su Qingsang forgot everything in this entanglement. No matter how deep the night was, it couldn't stop the arrival of dawn. When Su Qingsang opened her eyes, she felt her body ache. At the same time, everything surged into her heart like a tide. She looked at the time. It was almost 10 o'clock. She was on duty on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. She didn't need to go to work today. Normally, she should be up to see Xiang Kaiping now. But Su Qingsang suddenly had an urge to see Li Qianxue. She quickly got up, washed up, and walked out of the room. Hua Jinyao was already out. There was a note left by him on the dining table. There was breakfast prepared by him in the kitchen. She just needed to heat it up and eat it. Su Qingsang hurriedly ate a few mouthfuls, then took her bag and went out. In fact, she didn't know what she could do when she saw Li Qianxue. Chapter 422. Su Qingsang suddenly stopped when the car arrived at the Su family's villa. So what if he saw it? So what if it was confirmed? It had already been decided. Looking at it again would only increase her sadness. What if it wasn't true? What if all of Hua Jinyao's deductions were wrong? Thinking of this, Su Qingsang wanted to turn around and leave quickly. Sister? Su Yusen suddenly appeared. He stood by the car and knocked on Su Qingsang's window. Why are you here? Su Qingsang bit her lip and couldn't speak for a long time. What do you want? Are you going home? Su Yusen was referring to the Su mansion. Su Qingsang shook her head instinctively. When she saw Su Yusen's surprised look, she nodded again. Yes, I'm here for you. For me? Su Yusen raised his eyebrows. There was obvious confusion in his eyes. What do you want? It's nothing. Su Qingsang smiled awkwardly. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw her bag on the passenger seat, and her eyes lit up. Last time I went to Japan, I bought you a gift. I didn't have a chance to give it to you. Yesterday, I forgot. So. As she spoke, she took out the gift from her bag, got out of the car, and put it in Su Yusen's hand. You came to give this? Su Yusen looked at the box in his hand. He was obviously surprised. Yes. Su Qingsang nodded. She rarely lied, but this time she had to. For a moment, she looked a little uncomfortable. Su Yusen didn't think about it. He didn't open the gift. Looking at the box, he felt very touched. Thank you, sister. You're welcome. Su Qingsang glanced at him and said casually, Why are you alone? Where's Dad? He went out to give New Year's greetings. Then, where's Auntie? Su Qingsang asked more casually. It sounded like she was just chatting. She went to the United States. Went to the United States? Su Qingsang was stunned, obviously a little surprised. Yes. Su Yusen pointed to the car not far behind him, which had just driven into the Su mansion. I just drove my mother to the airport. She went to the United States to see my sister. He was referring to Su Peijian, of course. Su Qingsang nodded. She didn't know what to feel. Su Peijian, how is she? It's all right. Actually, it wasn't good at all. How good could it be to be alone outside and not be able to come back for the new year? Su Qingsang didn't know what to say. Wasn't Su Qinghui the one to blame for Su Peijian's poor life? She couldn't say it out loud. Auntie, didn't you go there before the new year? Su Yusen was a little surprised that Su Qingsang had asked about Li Qianxue twice today. However, he didn't think too much about it. I don't know. After you left yesterday, my mom started packing. Then he said he wanted to go to America to see my sister. In fact, Su Yusen didn't know what had happened. However, he could guess that it had something to do with Su Qinghui. However, as a child, it was not appropriate for him to question Su Qinghui. Su Qinghui went to someone else's house early in the morning to wish them a happy new year. He had actually thought about going to the United States with Li Qianxue to look for Su Peijian. After all, he was still on vacation. However, he didn't expect that Li Qianxue didn't want to take him. Instead, she asked him to stay at home to accompany Old Master Li. I see. Su Qingsang didn't say anything. She probably knew why Li Qianxue was in a bad mood yesterday. She had always thought that Su Qinghui just didn't love her. She didn't expect that he had another woman. This should be a relatively big blow to Li Qianxue, right? Sister? Seeing that Su Qingsang was distracted again, Su Yusen couldn't help but ask again. Su Qingsang smiled. It's okay. I was just chatting. Since Dad and Auntie are not at home, I'll leave first. You're not staying for dinner? No need. Su Qingsang turned to leave. Before she left, she looked at Su Yusen and suddenly stopped. Yusen, you're going to take the college entrance examination this year, right? Yes. Good luck. Don't worry. I will. His grades had always been good. He didn't have to worry about his studies. That's good. Su Qingsang looked at Su Yusen. When she met his somewhat inexplicable gaze, she uncomfortably took a step back. Then, I'll leave first. As she said this, her eyes suddenly looked at the top of Su Yusen's head. Hey! What is this? What? Lower your head. There seems to be something dirty on your head. When Su Qingsang spoke, she motioned for Su Yusen to lower his head. Su Yusen didn't think much about it. There were children outside setting off firecrackers just now. He might have bumped into it. The moment he lowered his head, Su Qingsang reached out and pinched a hair in front of her and gently pulled it. Okay. She pinched the hair tightly and smiled at Su Yusen. I saw wrong. I'm sorry. I didn't hurt you, did I? No. Even though Su Yusen felt that this sister was strange today, for the sake of her coming to pray, he didn't want to care about anything. It's good that you're fine. Su Qingsang waved her hand. Then, I'll leave first. Okay. Su Qingsang got in the car and watched Su Yusen wave at her, then go forward to the Su house. She pinched the strand of hair and carefully took out a piece of tissue from her bag to wrap it up. Su Qingsang closed her eyes. There were some things, even if she didn't want to say it, she hoped that there would be a result. Su Qingsang was about to start the car when she suddenly thought of something. Even if Su Yusen and she were not siblings of the same father and mother, half of their DNA would be similar. So this couldn't be counted. What should she do? Closing her eyes, Su Qingsang still drove the car into the Su house. Old Master Li and Su Yusen were already sitting in the living room talking. They were talking about Li Qianxue's trip to the United States. They were a little surprised to see Su Qingsang enter the door. Su Qingsang endured the awkwardness and greeted them. She used the excuse that she had something to take from her room upstairs and turned to go upstairs. Su Yusen really felt that Su Qingsang was not normal today, so he wanted to follow her to see, but Old Master Li asked about Li Qianxue again. Su Yusen was a little slow, but Su Qingsang took the opportunity to go upstairs and go to Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue's room. It wasn't the 7th day of the Lunar New Year, so there weren't many servants in the Su family. Most of them were on vacation. She didn't have to worry about not being able to find Li Qianxue's hair. On Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue's pillows, she successfully found 2 strands of hair, one long and one short. Carefully arranging the 2 strands of hair, Su Qingsang quickly left the room. She went to Su Qinghui's study again. At this time, she was really grateful to Su Qinghui for being so at ease with his family. The door wasn't locked at all. She also found Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui's medical reports in the bottom drawer of the study. Su Qinghui was type B. But Li Qianxue was type AB. Su Qingsang also saw the other two medical reports. One was Su Yusin's, who was also type AB. The other was Su Peijian's, who was type B. Putting the 4 medical reports back in the drawer, Su Qingsang felt that even if she didn't do a paternity test now, she would be able to guess the result. Su Qinghui was type B, and Xiang Kaiping was type O. Children born from the combination of type B and type O blood. They were either type O or type B. Therefore, Xiang Kaiping couldn't give birth to her, but she could give birth to Su Peijian. Su Peijian was type B, which happened to be the same blood type as Su Qinghui. This was also the reason why Li Qianxue didn't suspect anything for so many years. And Su Yusin was type AB. Just like her, he had inherited Li Qianxue's blood type. Su Qingsang finished reading and left in a hurry. At the stairs, she happened to meet Su Yusin, who came up to see what was wrong with her. "Sister, did you find what you were looking for? Do you need help?" "No need." Su Qingsang shook her head. "I didn't find it. Maybe I remembered wrongly. Is it very important? Do you want me to help you?" "No need." Su Qingsang shook her head. "You stay with the old master. I have something to do, so I have to go." Su Yusin only felt that Su Qingsang was acting strange today. He didn't think too much about it. Finally, he thought of another thing. Could it be that Su Qingsang was wronged by Hu Jinyao? She wanted to ask her family to stand up for her, but was embarrassed. Thinking about it carefully, it was really possible. Su Yusin thought about it and decided to find a chance to ask. Even if Li Qianxue didn't recognize Su Qingsang, he had already regarded her as his sister. Su Qingsang didn't know that Su Yusin had a big misunderstanding because of her strangeness. She was anxious to go for the new year after she got the hair, so the paternity test center naturally didn't work. But Su Qingsang had special channels. She used to have a medical school classmate who ended up working at the paternity test center. She called that classmate, then hurriedly took the strand of hair and went to find her classmate. A paternity test didn't necessarily have to be a father and son, or a mother and daughter. If the two people doing the test on Tiananmen Square were brothers and sisters, it could also be tested. When she went to the paternity test center, her classmate was already there. Su Qingsang gave the hair of Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui to her classmate. Finally, she pulled out 2 hairs from her own hair. She put them together with Su Qinghui's and Li Qianxue's. "Please do a paternity test for me." "What's wrong?" Her friend took the 2 hairs and began to note her information. "After so many years, you suddenly found out that you were picked up by your parents. Are you a little tadpole looking for its mother today?" Su Qingsang wasn't in the mood to fool around with her. "This name is my father. This is my aunt." Now that she said that she is my mother, I'm actually willing to believe them, but I still want to make sure. So, please. Okay. I know what to do. Her classmate marked it and glanced at Su Qingsang. "Come back in a week to get the results." "That long?" Her classmate laughed. "Okay. I'm just kidding. Other people need a week. You can come back tomorrow." "Okay. Thank you." Su Qingsang's heart didn't relax because of her classmate's words. Instead, she felt that her heart couldn't calm down. Chapter 423. The time of the day passed quickly and slowly at the same time. Su Qingsang was peeling an apple for Xiang Kaiping in the ward. Xiang Kaiping watched her and spoke carefully. "Qingsang, have you been too tired lately?" Su Qingsang paused for a moment. She peeled the apple and looked at Xiang Kaiping. "How come?" "I'm not tired. I don't have many days to rest. I'm a little conflicted. I know you've been working hard. Actually, you can take advantage of these few days to rest." Xiang Kaiping really felt that her daughter and son-in-law were too tired to take care of her every day. You can go out with Hua Jinyao when you're free. You don't have to worry about me. With Xiao Ning and Xiao Yu taking turns to take care of her, she didn't feel that she needed her daughter's company. Mom. I'm fine. I'm not tired. Su Qingsang cut the apple into slices, picked up a piece with a toothpick, and put it in front of Xiang Kaiping. Don't think so much. Xiang Kaiping took the apple. There was a smile and gratitude in her eyes. Su Qingsang looked at Xiang Kaiping with a complicated gaze. She knew very well that Su Qinghui's craziness was most likely real. She and Su Peijian might really have been switched by the dragon and phoenix. How could Xiang Kaiping not think too much? She wasn't the one who raised Su Qingsang. The mother and daughter met halfway. To be serious. It could be said that they had no feelings. But now that Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao had done so much for her, Xiang Kaiping was already very touched. Naturally, she wouldn't ask for more. Mom. Su Qingsang knew what she was thinking just by looking at her. Do you think that I recognized you as my daughter halfway through? Are you afraid that I don't want to take care of you? How could that be? Xiang Kaiping smiled a little awkwardly. But in fact, Su Qingsang could see that she might really think that way. Mom. Su Qingsang didn't say anything else after that. Xiang Kaiping looked at her as if she didn't understand why she wanted to say something. What's wrong? No. Su Qingsang shook her head. I just often think that I'm so lucky. I picked up such a good mother so easily. Tell me, what if you're mistaken? I'm not your daughter. Su Qingsang didn't finish her sentence. She said it half-jokingly, which was much easier to cover up than if she said it seriously. What nonsense are you talking about? Xiang Kaiping was unhappy to hear this. In my heart, you are my daughter. My biological daughter. Mom. Xiang Caiping's words put Su Qingsang at ease. She squeezed Xiang Caiping's palm and said, yes. That was right. I'm your biological daughter. The mother and daughter started to laugh. Xiao Ning saw this scene when she came in. She also relaxed a lot. In the morning, Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang when he got up. Do you need me to go with you? When Su Qingsang came back yesterday, she told him that she was going to do a paternity test. Although he didn't think it was necessary because the facts were already so obvious. However, Su Qingsang's actions made some sense. Su Qingsang looked at him and nodded slightly, but then immediately shook her head. What happened? Hua Jinyao didn't understand what she meant. Do you want me to go with you or not? I want you to go with me, but I want to go alone. But I want to go alone. Su Qingsang thought about her own thoughts. Hua Jinyao, do you know? I want someone to share the burden, and I'll have to face the news later. I don't want to bear it alone. I might have something like that happen. In fact, the answer couldn't be more obvious now. There was a 99% chance that it might be Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue's child. Now she just needed to be sure. But when it came down to it, she didn't want to face that result. I'll go with you. Hua Jinyao held her hand. No matter what the result is, I'll be with you. Su Qingsang met his gaze and suddenly nodded heavily. Okay. She just wanted to find an answer. It didn't matter if it was the worst result or the best result. For her, no matter which result it was, she actually didn't want it to happen. However, she couldn't avoid the matter in front of her. After washing up, she called her classmates and finally went to the paternity test center. She got the 2 paternity test reports. One was for her and Su Qinghui, and the other was for her and Li Qianxue. If possible, she hoped that she wasn't Su Qinghui's daughter or Li Qianxue's daughter. If only she was an orphan. She could treat Kaiping as her biological mother. She could treat her as a favor from the Su family and the Li family. Hu Jinyao took the results from her hand. Su Qingsang didn't stop him. She watched Hu Jinyao open the results and read them. The first one was for her and Su Chenghui. He put the results in Su Qingsang's hand. Actually, you don't need to do this test at all. Because you look so much like Su Chenghui. Su Qingsang knew it herself. She was also anxious that day. She wished that she wasn't Su Chenghui's daughter. Hu Jinyao took out the other paternity test report. Su Qingsang's breathing slowed down. She stared at Hu Jinyao nervously, not wanting to miss any expression on his face. In the end, the test result was only a thin piece of paper. He looked up at Su Qingsang with a clear expression. Su Qingsang, the probability that you and Li Qianxue are mother and daughter is 99.9%. Su Qingsang had already guessed this result. At this time, she wasn't surprised at all. She reached out her hand to take the test report. He memorized every single word written on it. Hu Jinyao looked at her nervously. He didn't understand what she wanted to do now. What could Su Qingsang do? Su Qingsang didn't want to do anything now, and she couldn't do anything. She finished reading and carefully put away the test results. Finally, she raised her head to look at Hu Jinyao. My father is really a scumbag. Isn't that right? Hu Jinyao didn't expect that after waiting for a long time, she would say such a thing. He wanted to say something, but he felt that it was too useless to say anything. Wife, he's really a scumbag. Su Qingsang held the two test reports and sniffed, as if trying to relax herself. Tell me, why is he such a scumbag? Hu Jinyao looked at her and reached out to pull her into his arms. He gently patted her back. Do you want to get back at him? Su Chenghui hurt Su Qingsang. He had turned her into an illegitimate daughter. She could have been the daughter of a rich family. That wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that he caused Su Qingsang to lose the motherly love of more than 20 years. There were other things. In Hu Jinyao's opinion, Su Chenghui really went too far. No. Su Qingsang pressed her face against Hu Jinyao's chest and rubbed her little face against his chest. Hu Jinyao, I don't want to hate him. It's tiring to hate someone. But I don't want to forgive him just like this. I want to go back to Rong City, okay? Okay. Let's go to Rong City and bring my mother with us. Stay away from Su Chenghui and the Li family. The Li family, Li Qianxue, Su Chenghui. None of them had anything to do with her. I want to cut off contact with them. From now on, I'm just Su Qingsang. An illegitimate daughter without a father and only a mother. No. Hu Jinyao looked at her and suddenly reached out to pinch her little hand. You're still my wife. You're still my biological wife. As he spoke, he leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. Su Qingsang felt a faint warmth surging in her heart. The hurt that came from her biological father seemed to have faded a lot at this moment. Hu Jinyao. Thank you. You've said that before. Then, Hu Jinyao, I like you. You've said that before too. Hu Jinyao deliberately teased her. Then. Su Qingsang was at a loss for words. After thinking for a long time, she finally said, Hu Jinyao, I like you very much. I like you very much. She had never said that before, had she? Hu Jinyao kissed her cheek again with a faint smile on his face. I've never heard that before. You can say it a few more times next time. Su Qingsang couldn't help but want to laugh. Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang wrapped her arms around his waist and said with a smile in her voice, It's so good to have you here. Hu Jinyao didn't say anything but hugged her tighter. Su Qingsang could let it go just like that, but Hu Jinyao didn't want to let it go just like that. There were some things he didn't do before because he didn't want to make Su Qingsang unhappy. But in this situation, he had to do something. Tianyu Group had 3 projects with the Li Corporation last year. 2 of the 3 projects were supervised by Su Qinghui himself. So when Su Qinghui saw Hua Jinyao in his office in the past, he wasn't surprised. But today was different. Hua Jinyao looked a little different today. He thought of the conversation between Hua Jinyao and him in the study that day, which was overheard by Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue was so angry that she booked a plane ticket to the United States. She didn't care that it was the new year. It had been a few days now, but Li Qianxue hadn't called him even once. Other than calling old Master Li every day to tell him that he was safe, there was basically nothing else for him to do. Now when Su Qinghui saw Hua Jinyao, he still looked a little uncomfortable. It was really not a glorious thing to be seen arguing with his wife by his son-in-law. The new year is not over yet. Why is there something wrong as soon as you start work? Su Qinghui was the general manager, so it didn't matter even if he came a few days late. It was just that he didn't want to stay at home alone, facing his son's strange and inquisitive eyes, and facing old Master Li's seemingly blaming eyes. There is something wrong, Hua Jinyao said with a calm expression. What is it? Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qinghui. He really couldn't imagine that Su Qinghui, on the surface, didn't look like someone who would do such a thing. But who would know what was going on behind the scenes? Chapter 424. Su Qinghui was stunned. What did you say? Are you going to Rong City? Su Qinghui knew that Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao were going to Rong City sooner or later. He knew that Hua Jinyao was from Rong City and that they would leave Lin City sooner or later, but he didn't expect it to be so soon. When did that happen? Have you really made up your minds? Yes. We've already decided. He had been paying attention to Su Qinghui's facial expression as he spoke. Qingsang's mother has been in Rong City all these years. She also said that she was already used to the climate there. I want to go back. Su Qinghui was stunned to hear him mention Xiang Kaiping. Xiang Kaiping was also from Rong City. Did they decide to leave together? Qingsang has also made up her mind. You're coming with me. So I'm here to greet you. Hua Jinyao paused for a second. You're Qingsang's father, after all. We have to tell you that we're leaving Lin City. After all, if he really left, it wouldn't be so easy to see him in the future. The flight will take more than 2 hours. Su Qinghui said nothing. He had just finished arguing with Li Qianxue. For the sake of Su Qingsang's background. Now, Su Qingsang was leaving Rong City. Given her personality, she would probably not come back with Xiang Kaiping by her side. Even if she came back, she wouldn't come back often. This would make things easier for him. He thought. Because the relevant people were not in Lin City, it meant that no one would mention what happened back then. For some reason, Su Qinghui felt that the situation in front of him was not bad. Hua Jinyao looked into Su Qinghui's eyes. He didn't see any reluctance in his eyes. Instead, it seemed like he was relaxed. He looked at Su Qinghui very carefully. He had been looking at Su Qinghui until he saw that trace of relaxation. At first, he just wanted to vent his anger, but now, he wanted to do more for Su Qingsang. Dad seems to be very happy. Hua Jinyao stared at Su Qinghui's face, not missing any expression on his face. No matter what, Qingsang is your daughter. Now that she's leaving, you actually feel very relaxed and happy. Hua Jinyao looked rather relaxed. His voice was very soft, and his body seemed to be leaning back in the chair rather casually. However, his gaze was quite sharp. She stared straight at Su Qinghui's face as if she wanted to stare into his heart. What nonsense are you talking about? Su Qinghui cleared his throat and tried to hide the uneasiness in his heart. How am I very happy? Realizing that his tone was not quite right, Su Qinghui took a deep breath and said, I'm not unhappy. Qingsang is my daughter. Of course, I want her to be well. Now that she's married to you. Then you'll be in charge of her future matters. If she wants to leave, I believe you will arrange everything for her. Rome City is bigger than Lin City. She'll definitely have a better future there. In that case, why should I be unhappy? Su Qinghui said a lot in one breath. But none of his words were on point. Hua Jinyao finally understood. He leaned to one side, one hand on the arm of the chair. He faced Su Qinghui with a lazy, sharp, contradictory attitude. You really have no reason to be unhappy. Because for you, Su Qingsang's leaving is a good thing. Su Qinghui was stunned for a moment. He didn't immediately understand what Hua Jinyao meant. He only thought that he was being sarcastic. What nonsense are you talking about? I'll say it again. Su Qingsang is my daughter. Of course, I want her to be well. Really? Hua Jinyao's eyes were sharp. You want her to be well, but you don't want her to be too well. The premise of you wanting her to be well is that you don't want her to be better than Su Peijian. Am I right, Dad? Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao. Su Qinghui was angered by his words and attitude. What are you doing now? Do you think that just because your Tianyu group helped our Li Corporation make some money and did a few projects, you have the right to tell me what to do? I don't dare to criticize you. Hua Jinyao spread his hands, and the smile on his face was a little innocent. Dad, you really hurt my heart by saying that. He used this method to deal with Su Qingsang to deal with Su Qinghui. The expression on his face seemed to be playful, but his eyes were clear. Su Qinghui listened to his nonsense today and felt more and more confused. If you have nothing else to say, you can leave first. I still have something to do. I won't keep you company. Dad. Don't be in a hurry. I haven't finished yet. Hua Jinyao's words and his smile made Su Qinghui feel uncomfortable. I'm thinking. The reason why you're happy is because if Su Qingsang isn't here, no one will appear in front of you all the time, and no one will make you unhappy because their limelight has overshadowed Su Peijian. More importantly, he looked at Su Qinghui's face and said word by word. If Su Qingsang is gone, then the fact that she is not Xiang Caiping's daughter will really become a secret. No one will ever know. Su Qinghui had already heard this news the day before. He didn't want to hear it anymore. Hua Jinyao's next words caught Su Qinghui off guard. No one will know that she is Li Qinshue's biological daughter. Am I right? Su Qinghui stood up abruptly. He stared at Hua Jinyao as if he was looking at a monster. Are you crazy? Saying such words in front of him. If he wasn't crazy, then what was? What a coincidence. Hua Jinyao had a faint smile on his face. When I told Qingsang my speculation a few days ago, she said exactly the same thing as you. Su Qinghui didn't catch the word speculation in his words. He only heard Hua Jinyao say that Su Qingsang also knew. Hua Jinyao. Su Qinghui's chest rose and fell violently. He suppressed the shock in his heart. How could he let Su Qingsang know? Absolutely not. He knew what the consequences would be if he admitted to this matter, so he would never admit it even if he was beaten to death. What on earth do you want to do? Who told you that Su Qingsang is Li Qinshue's daughter? Who? Dad. Let's not beat around the bush. Yes, or no. You know very well. Hua Jinyao, I don't know. I don't know what you want to say. Anyway, get out of here now. I don't want to listen to your nonsense. Nonsense? All right, he was going to talk nonsense to the end today. You asked me just now who told me. So, I'll tell you now. Who told me? Chapter 425. Su Qinghui watched him take out the 2 pieces of paper. At first glance, he couldn't see clearly what he was holding. But his intuition told him that it wouldn't be what he wanted to see. Dad, you might not know. Hua Jinyao opened the 2 pieces of paper and spread them out in front of Su Qinghui. Qing Sang took your hair and did a paternity test. Paternity test? Su Qinghui's eyes widened. Actually, there's no need to do it at all. Right? Hua Jinyao raised his eyebrows slightly and pushed the 2 pieces of paper towards Su Qinghui. Because you know very well whose child Qing Sang is. Su Qinghui didn't look at the paternity test report at all. His body was extremely stiff behind the desk, and his whole face was covered with a layer of green. What? Aren't you going to take a look? Hua Jinyao's body leaned forward slightly. His aura was completely unleashed, and he didn't restrain it at all. If an ordinary person faced his gaze, they would probably be the first to give the answer. But who was Su Qinghui? After a brief panic, he calmed down. He didn't even look at the 2 reports. Hua Jinyao, what do you want? Are you really not going to take a look? Hua Jinyao touched his chin. His sharp eyes stared straight at Su Qinghui's face. Hua Jinyao. Su Qinghui had completely calmed down. What do you want? What can I do? I don't want anything. Hua Jinyao stood up. He put his hands on the table, and his deep eyes didn't miss any expression on Su Qinghui's face. I just want to ask you, when you switched the 2 children, did you feel guilty? Since Su Qinghui had calmed down, he wouldn't be affected by Hua Jinyao anymore. Are you questioning me now? You can think of it that way. Hua Jinyao's expression didn't change. He was questioning him, so what? I'm really curious. For more than 20 years, you watched Li Qianxue spoil a daughter who wasn't her own, but ignore her own daughter every day. Aren't you very proud? Su Qinghui's expression changed slightly, but only for a moment. He didn't say anything. His eyes were extremely indifferent. Hua Jinyao, this is between me and her. It has nothing to do with you. Yes. This is between you and Li Qianxue. But it has something to do with Qing Sang. You let her carry the name of an illegitimate daughter for so many years. You let her miss out on motherly love for so many years. You even refused to give her even a little more care and love. Su Qinghui, do you think you deserve to be a father? Su Qinghui's expression changed again. He looked at Hua Jinyao and suddenly nodded heavily. His lips curled into a mocking smile. Are you here to vent her anger now? I wouldn't dare. Hua Jinyao's voice was even more sarcastic. No matter what, you are my father-in-law. I wouldn't dare to do anything to you. Then what do you mean by saying all these? Hua Jinyao stood straight. His tall body gave Su Qinghui enough pressure even though there was a desk between them. I don't mean anything. Hua Jinyao clenched his fists, and his heart was filled with great anger. That kind of anger even made him want to beat Su Qinghui up. But he resisted. He just looked at Su Qinghui. I just want to tell you that your secret is no longer a secret. I know it. Qing Sang knows it too. Su Qinghui didn't say a word. Hua Jinyao slightly leaned his head forward. As long as we want, we can tell the old master and Li Qianxue at any time about Qing Sang's real identity and whose daughter she is. Su Qinghui was still silent. Before, Xiang Kaiping appeared very suddenly. Su Qingsang knew that she wasn't Xiang Caiping's child. But none of that was as sudden as Hua Jinyao's appearance now. He really didn't think that one day, his secret would be known by others. These things can't be hidden forever. The truth will always be revealed to the world one day. I just want to know, when that day really comes, how will you deal with yourself? Su Qinghui had impulsively wanted to take revenge on Li Qianxue. He chose that path. He thought that he could hide it from the world, but all the way to today, he didn't dare to think about what he would face when Su Qingsang's identity was discovered. Now that Hua Jinyao pointed it out directly, he didn't dare to think about it at all. In the beginning, he could still imagine the result of Li Qianxue knowing the answer, and the scene of him taking revenge and laughing at Li Qianxue. But the more he thought about it, the more he didn't dare to think about it. He couldn't imagine what kind of state Li Qianxue would be when she found out about it. In the face of such a question from Hu Jinyao, he could only force himself to be calm. That's my business. It's none of your business. Hu Jinyao wasn't surprised by his attitude at all. He didn't speak again, just looked at him coldly. The atmosphere in the office was quiet, and neither of them spoke. However, in the corridor outside the office, a figure stood there for a long time, his eyes full of shock. He was about to knock on the door and enter, but at this time, he completely stopped there. As if he was frightened, he quickly ran away without thinking. He ran very fast, as if a ghost was chasing behind him. In the office, Su Qinghui's imposing manner finally weakened. He sat on the chair weakly, lowered his head, and supported his forehead with one hand. I actually didn't want to, I really didn't want to. If it was impulsive at first, he only thought about revenge. In the end, it was already out of control. The further it went, the more he didn't dare to face it. He even deliberately made himself very bad to Su Qingsang and completely ignored her. He hoped that through this action, Li Qianxue wouldn't make things difficult for Su Qingsang. He knew that if he showed Su Qingsang any concern, even if it was only a little, it would make Li Qianxue unhappy. He couldn't give Su Qingsang the status of the Li family's granddaughter-in-law, the eldest daughter of the Su family. But he could let her live a relatively peaceful life. Later, she was admitted to university and moved out. Everything was actually developing in a good direction for him. This was good. She had her own life. She was kind, optimistic, and strong. If she lived a good life, Su Qinghui could also feel less guilty. Things had developed to this point, and it was no longer something Su Qinghui could control. He closed his eyes, and everything that had happened over the years flashed through his mind like a horse lantern. His voice came through his palm. It was so low that if there weren't only the two of them in the office, Hu Jinyao almost couldn't hear it clearly. Do you want to tell Qianxue now? Hu Jinyao looked at him and had a feeling that the Su Qinghui in front of him was a pitiful person. A pitiful person who was punished by hatred and impulsiveness. But he wouldn't sympathize with him. There must be something hateful about a pitiful person. Qingsang didn't let me say it. Su Qinghui slowly raised his head and looked at Hu Jinyao in shock. He didn't believe it. He didn't believe that Su Qingsang would give up her original identity. He didn't believe it. You don't believe it, do you? I don't believe it either. Hu Jinyao's voice was very cold. Thinking of that woman who looked cold but was actually a little silly, his heart ached a little. But this is really her decision. Do you know why? Su Qinghui didn't say anything. He looked at Hu Jinyao with confusion in his eyes. Because Qingsang said. She can't hurt Xiang Kaiping. Su Qinghui's body trembled, and his face had already turned pale. She spent a few months with Xiang Kaiping and really developed a mother-daughter relationship. He didn't dare to think about what would happen if Xiang Kaiping knew that it was her own daughter who had a conflict with her. And it was her own daughter who had almost caused her to be paralyzed. How would Xiang Kaiping face Su Peijian? How would she face Li Qianxue's daughter, who was supposed to be on the opposite side of her? Su Qinghui's thin lips were tightly pursed. He stood there, his body a little stiff. You probably haven't thought about it, have you? Hu Jinyao looked at him and sighed softly in his heart. One move of yours could drive two women crazy. Li Qianxue couldn't accept it, but how could Xiang Kaiping accept it? You probably don't know how good Xiang Kaiping is to Qingsang, do you? Hu Jinyao looked at him indifferently. He didn't mind telling him some facts that Su Qinghui didn't know. Do you know why she met Su Peijian last time? Because she wanted to buy wool for Qingsang and knit a scarf for her. You probably don't know yet, but she not only knit sweaters and scarves for Qingsang, but also made cured meat and sausages for Qingsang. She bought the jade Buddha pendant for Qingsang because she thought that Qingsang stayed in the hospital every day, so she wanted her to wear a jade Buddha pendant to comfort her. Stop it. Su Qinghui suddenly glared at Hu Jinyao. Stop it. He lowered his head again and covered his face with his hands. Hu Jinyao couldn't see his expression, but he didn't want to stay any longer. He looked at Su Qinghui with a calm expression. If Qing Sang doesn't want to say it, I won't say it. But, I really want you to know. A secret can't always be a secret. One day, the secret will be exposed. I have a feeling that even if we don't say it, I'm afraid your secret can't be hidden for long. Based on Li Qianshua's misunderstanding of Su Qinghui at that time, she would definitely do something in the future. At that time, could Su Qinghui's secret really be kept? Su Qinghui still didn't raise his head. He maintained that posture. He had been covering his face with his hands, so Hu Jinyao had no way of knowing his expression at that time. Thinking about it, he felt complicated and struggled. But he didn't want to sympathize with Su Qinghui. Compared to him, Li Qianxue and Xiang Kaiping were more pitiful and innocent. Of course, the most innocent was Su Qingsang. Thinking of Su Qingsang, Hu Jinyao didn't want to see Su Qinghui again. He turned and left. In fact, no matter how pitiful Li Qianxue and Xiang Kaiping were, it had nothing to do with him. He just felt sorry for that little woman. She was too sensible and too mature, which made him feel sorry for her. As for Su Qinghui, he knew that with what he said today, Su Qinghui would probably have a hard time in the near future. Chapter 426. Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao went home. Today, she had asked Sister Lu to tidy up the place. I asked Sister Lu to tidy up Mom's room. Mom will be discharged in 2 days. When the time comes, we'll bring Mom home to take care of her. Okay. Hu Jinyao agreed. I wanted to live in your villa since it's bigger. It's also convenient for Mom to move around. Sure. Whatever you say. Also. Su Qingsang found that Hu Jinyao only listened to her and didn't say anything. What's wrong? Why are you only listening to me? Do you have any objections? You decide. Hu Jinyao pulled her to his side and sat down. These are all small things. You don't have to ask me. I'm not asking you. Su Qingsang turned to look at him. What's wrong with you today? Something doesn't seem right. Hu Jinyao shook his head and said, the Lantern Festival is coming. Do you want to go back to Rome City with me to see Grandpa? Let's make some arrangements and bring Mom over. Su Qingsang bit her lip. This matter had been decided a long time ago. She was not reluctant to part with it. Sure. I'll ask my mother. Then, he asked Dr. Jiang. If he says it's okay, we'll take Mom back to Rome City. Hu Jinyao reached out and gently stroked the hair on her forehead. Let me know after you've asked the doctor. I'll arrange the rest. Yeah. Su Qingsang had nothing to worry about. He had always been efficient and more thorough than her. Xiang Kaiping would probably agree with the decision to return to Rome City. However, Su Qingsang suddenly fell silent, and a complicated expression appeared on her face. What happened? Su Qingsang looked at him, her lips pressed into a straight line. You said before we left Lin City. Will she come back? Seeing the hesitation in her eyes, Hu Jinyao felt as if his heart had been pricked by a needle. He reached out and pulled her into his embrace, hugging her tightly. You want to see her? Su Qingsang's face was pressed against his chest, and she could smell the refreshing scent of his body. A little. If he went to Rome City, he probably wouldn't come back easily. I want to see her before I leave. Hu Jinyao didn't speak. She looked up at him and said, You don't think so? There's nothing you can't do. Hu Jinyao tightened his arms around her waist. If you really miss her that much. Even if you want to fly to the United States to see her, let alone wait for her to come back. Su Qingsang lowered her head and seemed to be thinking. Forget it. It's better not to see him. You really can't see him? No. Su Qingsang shook her head. She must be in a bad mood recently. I'd better not provoke her. The last time Li Qianxue heard that Su Qinghui was cheating, she thought he was in love with someone else. He was probably in a bad mood right now. If she appeared again, it would undoubtedly provoke Li Qianxue even more. Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang. She seemed to be cold and didn't care about anyone. Actually, he was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. As long as he got close to her and familiarized himself with her, he would understand. I told you. If you want to see him, you can see him. Don't worry too much. How about this? Su Qingsang thought for a moment and said, let's set a time to go to Rome City. If she comes back before then, I'll go see her. If she doesn't come back before then, she didn't say the rest of the sentence. If that was really the case, she and her mother were not meant to be. Hua Jinyao held her whole body in his arms, lowered his head, and kissed her cheek. His kiss was very light, like a feather falling on her cheek. Do you miss her very much? Not really. Su Qingsang shook her head with a smile. If I knew about this earlier, I'm afraid I wouldn't be as calm as I am now. But it's grown up now. And our mother is here. So I'm much calmer. Su Qingsang suddenly became serious and looked at Hua Jinyao with a serious face. Do you know? When I was young, I often saw her holding Su Peijian. Then she would talk to her in a very gentle tone. In fact, she was a very strict person outside. But she was very gentle to Su Peijian. So I thought that if I had a mother, she would be like that. Because of this, Su Qingsang kept trying to get close to Li Qianxue. But in the end, she failed. Hua Jinyao nodded and looked at her calm face. He felt that she was too calm. You still want to acknowledge her, don't you? No. Su Qingsang denied it. I don't want to acknowledge her. I just feel that if I can, I want to see her. I just want to see her. It could be considered as fulfilling a wish in his heart. Although such a thought was a little ridiculous. Don't worry. I really just want to see her. I won't acknowledge her. Since she had made up her mind, she wouldn't regret it. But before that, she still needed some time and calmness to completely let it go. Hua Jinyao didn't say anything else. He hugged her tightly. His deep eyes narrowed slightly, as if he had made a decision. Su Qingsang didn't expect that she would meet another person before she went to see Li Qianxue. Since she was going to Rome City, she had to choose some gifts for old Master Hua. And Hua Jinyao's great-uncle, who was already living in Rome City. Her two uncles and aunt had to prepare some gifts. Shi Mengwan had been shopping with Su Qingsang for a long time, and she had also been choosing gifts for a long time. Although it was said that it was good to be rich, it could be solved with money. But after listening to Su Qingsang's words, Shi Mengwan felt that there were many people in the Hua family. There are so many relatives in the Hua family. Little Qingsang, with your simple personality, can you really handle it? Even if I can't handle it, I have to. In fact, Su Qingsang was indeed most afraid of troublesome interpersonal relationships, but she met Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao is so good to me. It's only right for me to face his family for him. You have awareness. Shi Mengwan patted her shoulder heavily. But I think you don't seem to be in a good mood today. What's wrong? You want to separate from me? Can't bear to part with me? Yes, yes, yes. Su Qingsang nodded repeatedly and reached out to pinch her cheeks. You don't know how much I can't bear to part with you. Just talk, don't touch me. Shi Mengwan touched her face narcissistically. I just took care of my face yesterday. Let me see. Su Qingsang leaned over to look at her, and there was a hint of teasing in her tone. Your face is so smooth, and your skin is so good. You still have to take care of it. You're not giving us a way out. Don't be ridiculous. You don't know the suffering of the hungry. You have Hua Jinyao. But I'm still single. I have to take good care of myself and make myself look more beautiful so that I can hook up with a tall, rich, and handsome man like you, right? No need to hook up. I'll ask Hua Jinyao to introduce a few to you. How about that? Okay. Shi Mengwan nodded with a casual expression. Su Qingsang didn't believe her. Why do I feel like it's fake? You don't believe me? If you don't believe me, I'll go find one later. Come on. Find one. You find one. Su Qingsang looked around and saw a man in front of her. His back looked a little familiar. That. Good figure. His front should be good too. Aren't you looking for one? Go. 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 I'm not afraid of you. Shi Mengwan was provoked by her. She glared at her and quickly took 2 steps forward. She took out a red bill from her bag, turned around, and made a face at Su Qingsang. Then, she quickly took a few steps forward to block the handsome man in front of her. Sir, I'm sorry. Did you drop this money? The moment Shi Mengwan raised her head, her expression changed. She stood there, exuding a dejected aura. Su Qingsang sensed that something was wrong and quickly stepped forward. Mengwan, what's wrong? When she saw the man, Su Qingsang was also stunned. No wonder the handsome man in front of her looked familiar. It turned out to be Zhang Haoze. Mr. Zhang. Hello. Hello, Mrs. Hua. Zhang Haoze greeted Su Qingsang and glanced at Shi Mengwan. I'm sorry, I didn't drop this money. Really? Shi Mengwan bit her lip. She crumpled the money into a ball and held it in her palm. Then, I'll ask someone else. Okay. Zhang Haoze responded and glanced at Su Qingsang. Mrs. Hua, are you shopping? Yes. Say hello to President Hua for me when you're free. I will. Thank you. Then, I have something else to do. I'll leave now. Go ahead. Su Qingsang felt that it was very stressful to be with someone like Zhang Haoze. After he left, she turned to look at Shi Mengwan. You're so lucky. She didn't try to strike up a conversation, but the moment she did, she ran into Zhang Haoze. Lucky? Shi Mengwan smiled mockingly. I think that I'm too unlucky. If she wasn't so unlucky, how could Zhang Haoze forget her? Mengwan, I think, do you want to do something else? What? I think that you might have mistaken me for someone else. After all, you haven't seen each other for more than 10 years. Seeing the worry in Su Qingsang's eyes, Shi Mengwan pretended to be careless and waved her hand. Don't worry. I'm just saying. I've decided to give up. Really? Of course it's true. Shi Mengwan hooked her arm. All right. All right, let's continue shopping. Buy gifts. Hua Jinyao has so many relatives. How many gifts do you need? Let's go. Su Qingsang was actually worried about Shi Mengwan. Shi Mengwan's situation was more complicated than hers. However, she also knew that it would be difficult to persuade her at the moment. She thought about it. Why not wait until she returned to Rong City and then invite Shi Mengwan to hang out? Then, she could let Hua Jinyao introduce a few young men to her. Maybe after Shi Mengwan met a few outstanding men, she would find that there were still many good men in the world. Let's go. I remember there's a good shop in front. Let's go and have a look. Shi Mengwan pulled Su Qingsang forward. Su Qingsang couldn't help but look at her, worried that she had really let go. Unexpectedly, Shi Mengwan pulled her too fast, and Su Qingsang was too focused on her. As a result, she accidentally bumped into a person who came out of the shop. Sorry. Su Qingsang hurriedly apologized. At the same time, she took a step back. Chapter 427. When Su Yusen saw Su Qingsang, he was obviously stunned. Almost subconsciously, he took a step to her side. Su Qingsang was also a little surprised. Su Yusun's movement happened to block the girl behind him. Because of his action, Su Qingsang couldn't help but take another look at the girl, and then found that she was not the Bai Jihan from before. Su Qingsang withdrew her gaze and didn't intend to meddle. Yusun? You're here shopping too? Yes. Su Yusun nodded and looked at Su Qingsang with a somewhat complicated expression. With your girlfriend? Did he mean that Bai Jihan was a thing of the past? Thinking of the woman who aborted a child for Su Yusun, Su Qingsang's gaze was a little subtle. She's not my girlfriend. Su Yusun explained quickly, completely ignoring the somewhat embarrassed face of the girl next to him. I just happened to meet her. Su Qingsang nodded. When she came just now, she really didn't see the two of them holding hands. Then, you guys continue. Sister. Su Yusun saw that Su Qingsang was about to leave and couldn't help but call her. Su Qingsang turned her face to look at him and raised her eyebrows, as if she didn't understand why he called her. Well, Su Yusun looked at Su Qingsang with his lips crossed. He actually had a lot to ask her and a lot to say. But now, facing Su Qingsang's indifferent gaze, he couldn't say a word. After a day, he still hadn't digested the news he heard yesterday. The shocking news that made him dumbfounded. Su Peijian wasn't his sister, Su Qingsang was. When he heard the news outside Su Qinghui's door, he was completely stunned. He couldn't believe it and didn't dare to face it. He even ran away like he was escaping, but after leaving, he couldn't help but turn back. He wanted to question Su Qinghui, ask him why he did this, and why he could do this. But before he could ask clearly, he heard Hua Jinyao's words. He said that Su Qingsang didn't intend to recognize Li Qianxue at all. That news shocked him again. He couldn't understand why Su Qingsang refused to recognize them. Refused to recognize Li Qianxue. Even after he heard Hua Jinyao's explanation. She said that Su Qingsang didn't want to hurt Xiang Kaiping, but did that mean she didn't want to hurt Xiang Kaiping? However, when he calmed down and seriously considered Su Qingsang's position, he tragically found that they really didn't have the right to ask Su Qingsang to acknowledge them. Had Li Qianxue ever cared about Su Qingsang? No. Had Su Qinghui ever been nice to Su Qingsang? Not at all. Had he ever been nice to Su Qingsang since he was a kid? Still nothing. He used to dislike this sister from the bottom of his heart. He thought that as an illegitimate daughter, she brought shame to the Su family. More importantly, her existence made the feelings of discord between her parents. But in reality, she was admitted to Lin City's a university medical school at the age of 17. After he graduated, he took the postgraduate exam and was now an outstanding doctor. What about Su Peijian? He had the ability, but the things he did in the dark. He had attacked Su Qingsang over and over again. The difference in strength between the two was obvious. In the past, he could still say that Su Peijian had her own standpoint. But when he calmed down, he only felt ashamed. As an illegitimate daughter, who didn't have many resources and was neglected by her parents, she worked hard enough and was ambitious enough. Putting all of this aside, Su Qingsang's attitude towards her family since she was a child was clear. Even if they weren't close, there was enough respect. He didn't like her before because Su Qingsang's existence made Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue not get along. But now he knew that Su Qingsang was his sister. His biological sister. He couldn't tell what he was feeling. Yesterday, he wanted to rush to Su Qingsang and explain things to her. But halfway through the car, he chickened out again. Yes. He chickened out. Li Qianxue went to the United States to accompany Su Peijian. For more than 20 years, Li Qianxue really loved Su Peijian as her own daughter. If Li Qianxue knew, what would she do? Su Qingsang didn't dare to think about it, and neither did Su Yusun. But was he really not going to say it? He struggled for an entire night without an answer. Early in the morning, his eyes were dark. Old Master Li could also see that he was in a bad mood, so he asked him to go out for a walk and didn't have to accompany him at home. He went out and met this female classmate next to him on the way. This female classmate's father had business dealings with the Li Corporation. Due to their friendship, when the other party asked her to help choose a gift for someone, he didn't object. He didn't expect to meet Su Qingsang. He looked at Su Qingsang and fell into a state of sluggishness. Those thousands of suppressed words seemed to be unable to be suppressed at this time. He couldn't help but want to get close to her and talk to her. What's wrong? Su Qingsang looked at Su Yusen, her younger brother, with obvious concern in her eyes. What happened? Nothing. Su Yusen didn't know what he could say. My mother went to the United States. I know. Su Qingsang's heart skipped a beat. She didn't understand why he would mention Li Qianxue. What's wrong? She might not be back so early. I know. Su Qingsang had already thought about it. She might not be able to see Li Qianxue before she left. Now that it was confirmed, she was a little disappointed, but she could accept it. But why did Su Yusen say this to her out of the blue? Could it be that he knew something? Su Yusen took a step forward. He seemed to want to clarify, but the female classmate next to him stood up at this time. Yusen, is this your sister? Isn't your sister Peijian? The girl had attended the Su family's banquet, so she naturally knew Su Peijian. However, she didn't know much about Su Qingsang. Shut up. It's none of your business. Su Yusen heard this and glared at the girl. I have 2 sisters. Can't I? The girl was shocked by Su Yusen. Her face changed a little, and she was speechless for a moment. When Su Yusen looked at Su Qingsang again, his eyes were full of apology. Sister, I'm sorry. It's okay. Su Qingsang waved her hand. If there's nothing else, let's continue shopping. You guys go ahead. Su Yusen's lips moved. He wanted to speak a few times, but in the end, he couldn't say a word. He could only watch as Su Qingsang left. The girl behind him still wanted to approach, but Su Yusen glared at her. He said, go shopping by yourself, and left. The girl was left there stomping her feet in anger. Qingsang, what's wrong with this cheap brother of yours? After they separated, Shi Mengwan whispered to Su Qingsang, why do I feel that he's acting weird today? You can see that too. Su Qingsang could see that too. However, she didn't think that Su Yusen would know that secret. After all, Hua Jinmiao couldn't tell Su Yusen, let alone Su Qinghui. Yes. Shi Mengwan thought of some things that Su Qingsang had told her before. Right, he specifically mentioned his mother. Do you think he hates you and Hua Jinmiao for sending Su Peijian to the United States? No way. Su Yusen wasn't that kind of person. However, Su Qingsang wasn't sure. I really don't know. You may know a person's face, but you don't know his heart. Shi Mengwan was afraid that Su Qingsang valued family too much and wouldn't even know that she was tricked in the end. I think it's better for you to keep a distance from the Su family. Su Qingsang didn't say anything. Keep a distance from the Su family? In this situation, even if she didn't want to keep a distance, she couldn't. After all, she was afraid that if she really got too close to the Su family, she might be exposed. You won't be unhappy if I say this, will you? Why would I? Su Qingsang knew that Shi Mengwan was doing this for her own good, so she wouldn't be unhappy. However, as for her own background, she suddenly didn't know how to tell Shi Mengwan. Of course, she knew that Shi Mengwan could keep a secret. However, Shi Mengwan was also on good terms with Xiang Kaiping now, and she often visited her when she was free. If Shi Mengwan found out, it would be very difficult for her to guarantee that Shi Mengwan wouldn't give herself away in front of Xiang Kaiping. Let's go. Let's continue shopping. Let's not talk about it for now. Since she had decided to treat Xiang Kaiping as her own mother, there was no need to say anything else. Okay. Let's go. Florida, America. Li Qianxue saw that Su Peijian had returned, and there was finally a little smile on her face. You're back? Yes. Compared to her, Su Peijian's expression was much worse. In the past, when she was still in Lin City, the new year was a lively time. She could play with her friends and fly everywhere. But this year? She was trapped here by Su Qinghui, and he wouldn't let her leave. He even enrolled her in some so-called advanced course. This advanced course sounded nice. It was a business management advanced course for young people. However, the people in it were people who were about the same age as her father in Su Peijian's eyes. She didn't want to go there for a day, and she couldn't wait to go back to China. Mom. Su Peijian sat down next to Li Qianxue and hooked her arm. Can't I go home? I don't want to stay here anymore. Li Qianxue didn't want her daughter to stay here either. If she could, she would take her daughter away immediately. However, she didn't want to go home now either. She felt disgusted when she thought that Su Qinghui had another woman. Didn't your father say that you should study for 3 months? But I can't stay for a month. Besides, you don't know what they're talking about, and I don't want to hear it at all. Su Peijian shook her arm and said coquettishly, Mom, just agree to go home, okay? Okay? Li Qianxue didn't speak. She really didn't want to go back, didn't want to see Su Qinghui's face. However, if she went back like this, she was afraid that Su Qinghui would quarrel with her again because of that woman. Mom. Su Peijian really felt wronged. I didn't do it on purpose. I also know that I was wrong. But Dad still won't let it go. Look, it's going to be the Lantern Festival in a few days. But I still have to spend the festival alone outside. I already said that I will accompany you. Chapter 428. Speaking of this, Li Qianxue's expression changed. In the past, even if she and Su Qinghui didn't get along on the surface, at least their family was still together. What about now? Not only did she not get along with Su Qinghui, but she also couldn't get along with him on the surface. If Su Qinghui didn't care about her, why should she care about him? You want to go home, right? Yes. I want to go home. Su Peijian saw that her mother's attitude had softened, so she quickly added fuel to the fire. Just take it that we're going back to accompany grandfather, okay? Li Qianxue was silent for a moment. If possible, she didn't want to go against Su Qinghui. For so many years, it seemed that she had the final say in everything, big and small. However, when it came down to it, she could never win against Su Qinghui. Since he dared to have a woman outside and was heartless to her, then he shouldn't blame her for being unjust. She was the one who gave birth to their daughter. Even if he didn't feel sorry for her, she would feel sorry for her. Li Qianxue patted Su Peijian's hand and made a decision. Don't go home. There are still a few days before the Lantern Festival. Let's go play for a few days before going back. Thank you, Mom. Su Peijian couldn't help but kiss Li Qianxue's cheek. Mom, you're the best. You. Li Qianxue poked Su Peijian's forehead, her eyes full of love. By the time Su Yusen arrived in the United States with the address given by Su Qinghui, Li Qianxue had already taken Su Peijian to Las Vegas. He could only fly over again. This time, Li Qianxue and Su Peijian met without a hitch. Mom. Sister. When he arrived, it was night time. Su Peijian and Li Qianxue were about to go out with their bags and coats in their hands. Where are you going? Let's go play downstairs. Su Peijian was in a bad mood and wanted to play a few rounds in the casino downstairs. Yusen, you came just in time. Do you want to join us? No. Su Yusen shook his head and looked at Li Qianxue. Mom, I have something to tell you. What is it that you can't tell me over the phone? Did you have to fly all the way to America just to tell me? Li Qianxue's hand was held by Su Peijian, so she couldn't move. She glanced at Su Yusen. He didn't look too well after flying all the way here. It seemed like he was exhausted. Have you eaten? I ate something on the plane. Not now. Li Qianxue did not miss the tiredness in her son's eyes. Even if you're not hungry, you must be tired, right? I'll go back to my room to rest first. We'll talk about it after you've rested. Mom. What I said is very important. Su Yusen took a step forward and was about to speak when he saw Su Peijian standing next to Li Qianxue. He thought for a moment and lowered his head helplessly. Forget it. I'll go and put my things down, then I'll accompany you down. Yusen, are you worried about us? Su Peijian smiled and patted her brother on the shoulder. All right. Don't worry. The security here is very good. Let me follow you. Otherwise, you're not allowed to go. Su Yusen was very insistent. He looked at Li Qianxue and said, if you don't let me follow you, I will tell Grandpa that you came to the casino to play. This time, it wasn't just Su Peijian. Li Qianxue's expression did not look too good either. Old Master Li didn't like young people to gamble. No matter what kind of entertainment it was fine to have fun, but once it was involved in gambling, it was out of the question. His health was not very good. Even Li Qianxue had to be careful. All right. I'll let you follow me. You haven't learned anything else since you grew up, but you've learned your father's way of managing people. Li Qianxue would not say anything bad about her father. If Su Yusen wanted to be like him, he would be like Su Qinghui. Yes. Brother, you're becoming more and more like Dad. Su Peijian added, not forgetting to lean in front of Li Qianxue and ask for her favor. I'm the best. I'm not like Dad at all. You're not just not like your father, you're not like me either. Li Qianxue pinched her cheek. There was no anger in her eyes, but more of a tease. I look like Grandma. Su Peijian had also seen a photo of Su Qinghui's mother. It had to be said that she really looked like her grandmother. The simple conversation between mother and daughter fell into Su Yusen's ears. He felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Yes. Su Peijian was not like her father or her mother. It was such a simple thing, but after so many years, no one paid attention to it. But Su Qingsang was different. She looked very much like Su Qinghui. To be honest, Su Qingsang and she were more like Su Qinghui's children. Yusen? Li Qianxue looked at her son in a daze and was a little worried. Are you too tired? If you are really too tired. He returned to his room to rest. Don't worry, we won't play for too long. We'll be back soon. Su Yusen stood there without moving. He nodded almost imperceptibly and carried his luggage into the room. When he came out again, he had already changed his clothes and was wearing a very decent three-piece suit. Although he was young, he often followed Su Qinghui and received an elite education, so he naturally had an imposing manner. He stood next to Li Qianxue. His tall figure gave her a sense of security. Mom, let me protect you today. Stupid Yusen, you only protect your mother and not me, right? That's right. You have a problem with that? You're so fierce, why would you need anyone to protect you? Sure. Are you itching for a beating? Su Peijian was about to attack Su Yusen as she spoke. This was originally a joke the two siblings often made in the past, but now Su Yusen was a little unable to bring it up. If it weren't for Su Qinghui's craziness, if it weren't for Su Qinghui's stubbornness, the one who did these things with him and was so close to him would only be Su Qingsang. Now it was Su Peijian. And even if one day he and Su Qingsang knew each other's identities, he was afraid that he and Su Qingsang would not be able to joke around like he did with Su Peijian. After all, the estrangement between them had been too long. It was difficult to repair the lost youth and friendship that grew up together. Li Qianxue sensitively noticed that her son's mood was not quite right today. She glanced at Su Peijian and said, "All right, your brother must be tired after coming all the way here. Don't disturb him. Unlike Su Chenghui, who only cared about Su Peijian, Li Qianxue could basically be fair to the two children. Occasionally, because Su Peijian was a girl and was her first child, she had to dote on her a little more. But in general, she still considered herself a very fair mother. As expected, Su Peijian stopped making trouble, but Su Yusin's expression was complicated. Li Qianxue loved Su Peijian so much. If he told the truth later, without much time to think, the three of them went downstairs. When they went to the magnificent hall, they saw a prosperous scene in front of them. Su Peijian liked crowds, and the scene in front of her was like a fish in water. Su Yusin had been following Li Qianxue and Su Peijian, watching them sit down in front of one dealer after another. They put down the chips, then got up and went to another. At first, she lost more than she won. Su Peijian lost a few million. She didn't take it seriously, and Li Qianxue naturally wouldn't take it seriously either. In such a place, a few million was like money. Su Yusin looked a little sad. He thought of Su Qingsang again. When she first bought that house, it was only $1 million or so. At that time, Su Peijian was not happy. She felt that Su Chenghui was too good to Su Qingsang. But in reality, all the enjoyment and fun that day should belong to Su Qingsang, not Su Peijian. Li Qianxue didn't want to play at first. Later, seeing that her daughter lost a lot, her hands were itching to try her luck. She didn't know if it was like what ordinary people said, losing in love, but winning in gambling. In more than half an hour, Li Qianxue not only earned back the millions that her daughter lost, but also won more than 10 million. Wow! Mom, you're so lucky today. Su Peijian's eyes lit up. Mom, continue. Which one do you think is better? Go big. Li Qianxue didn't care about the money, but the feeling of winning was very good. She swept away the anger she had suffered at Su Chenghui's hands. She pushed out more than half of the chips in her hand. Go big. She turned to look at Su Peijian, but her tone was a bit persuasive. This kind of thing, just play for a while. Don't take it too seriously. This is the last round. Whether we win or lose, we go back. Okay. Listen to Mom. As Su Peijian spoke, she saw Su Yusin standing still out of the corner of her eye. She couldn't help but pat him on the shoulder. Yusin, what are you doing? You're here, but you don't play a few rounds. What? Not enough pocket money? How much do you want? I'll give it to you. I don't need your money. Li Qianxue looked at her daughter's generosity and smiled. Yusin, if you really want to play, I'll give you these chips. Mom will give these chips to you. No need. I'll just watch you play. Su Yusin glanced at the table and watched Li Qianxue put most of the chips on the big side. Mom, I think you should go small this round. Why? You've opened 7 small rounds in a row. Do you think this one is still small? It's possible. As Su Yusin spoke, he leaned over and put the chips on the small side. Anyway, it's the last round. Let's bet on this one. I'll listen to you. Li Qianxue didn't care about the money. If you win, these are all yours. Mom, you're so biased. Su Peijian pouted, but she wasn't really unhappy. 5 minutes later, Su Yusin looked at the more than 30 million he had won and shook the check in his hand at Li Qianxue. Okay, I know you're good. Li Qianxue looked at her son, her eyes full of smiles. We won money today. Tomorrow, we'll go shopping. You guys are happy. Su Peijian was very depressed. You all won money, but I lost. I'm really unlucky tonight. Although she didn't lose much, compared with Su Yusin and Li Qianxue's luck, she was much worse. Okay. I'll go back and make it up to you. Su Yusin looked at Su Peijian and thought of the secret he knew. Maybe you've been too lucky in the past 20 years. That's why I want you to change your luck. Yusin, what nonsense are you talking about? Su Peijian was suddenly unhappy, but Su Yusin was unwilling to change his words. He turned in the direction of the elevator. Mom, look at him. If Li Qianxue still couldn't see that Su Yusin was in a bad mood today, then she would have been Su Yusin's mother for so many years for nothing. Okay. Don't talk too much. The three of them went upstairs again. Li Qianxue asked Su Peijian to go back to her room to rest, and she followed Su Yusin back to his room. Chapter 429. What happened in Lin City? Su Yusin also wanted to ask. He wanted to know what had happened. Why was it that his family was no longer like a home? Her father loved someone else and was with her mother for revenge. The mother couldn't get what she wanted. It was a pity that she had loved someone else's daughter for so many years. His sister was his sister, but she was no longer born to the same mother as him. His sister, who was born from the same mother as him, had now become the most distant member of the Yan family. Su Yusin was only 17 or 18 years old. Even if he had been raised by old Master Li's side at an early age. She also learned a lot from Su Qinghui. But how could those business things compare to getting along with family? He sat there without saying a word, and his whole person exuded a sense of dejection. Li Qianxue was shocked by Su Yusin's reaction. She had never seen Su Yusin like this. Her eyes were full of worry. Yusin, are you okay? Su Yusin suddenly reached out and hugged Li Qianxue. This action stunned Li Qianxue again. Ever since her son entered primary school, he had never been this close to her. The only thing Li Qianxue could think of was that something must have happened at home. Yusin, what happened at home? Tell me honestly. Su Yusin's voice was hoarse. He hugged Li Qianxue tightly. He was actually the same as Su Qingsang. He didn't dare to imagine Li Qianxue's reaction when she found out everything. It was hard to say. Yusin. Li Qianxue was even more worried about her son. Without thinking, she went to call Su Peijian. If you don't tell me, I'll call your sister. Mom. Su Yusin grabbed Li Qianxue. Don't go yet. Li Qianxue looked at her son, her face full of confusion. What's wrong with you? Tell me. Su Yusin's lips were pressed into a straight line, and he looked very serious. When he put on such an expression, he looked very much like Su Qinghui. Li Qianxue frowned. Is it your father? What happened to your dad? Mom. Su Yusin looked up at Li Qianxue. Do you know that dad, he? Tell me. What happened to your dad? No matter how angry she was, Su Qinghui was the man she had loved for so many years. She grabbed Su Yusin's arm and said, Tell me. What happened to your dad? Dad, he. Su Yusin didn't know what to say. He looked at Li Qianxue and thought about her endurance. If Dad did something wrong to you, sorry about me? What are you referring to? Li Qianxue's heart was beating very, very fast. Caring about Su Qinghui had almost become an instinct. It had been more than 20 years. Even if she didn't want to, she couldn't help but care about him. She's my sister. I was talking about Su Qingsang. Su Yusin carefully looked at Li Qianxue's expression. He kept thinking in his heart, about my sister, Su Qingsang. Do you know that she's actually, Li Qianxue's expression was a little strange. She stood up straight and stared at Su Yusin's face. Now even you know? Su Yusin looked up at Li Qianxue, as if he didn't quite understand that Li Qianxue already knew. Mom, you know? Of course I know. Thinking of 7, Li Qianxue only felt a fire burning in her heart. Why do you think I came to the United States? Su Yusin stood up and said, Mom. Mom, you actually know? Li Qianxue's expression was ugly, but Su Yusin couldn't sit still anymore. Mom, since you know, why did you still treat sister like that? What did I do? Li Qianxue looked at Su Yusen and couldn't believe that he was actually speaking up for Su Qingsang. How did I treat her? What do you want me to do to her? Don't you want to acknowledge her? Don't you want to treat her better? Su Yusen's eyes widened. He thought of the relationship between Li Qianxue and Su Peijian. Could it be that Li Qianxue really didn't mind? I'm good to her. Li Qianxue looked at her son as if she was looking at a madman. She didn't understand what Su Yusen meant by acknowledging her. Su Yusen, are you my son? You actually want me to be good to the daughter of another woman and your father? Li Qianxue's heart began to hurt at this moment. Su Qinghui had lied to her and hurt her, and now even her own son was siding with someone else. She only felt that her breath was stuck in her throat. She stared at Su Yusen as if she was looking at her own enemy. Su Yusen suddenly realized that Li Qianxue was not talking about the same thing as him at all. Mom, what are you thinking? How did sister become the child of another woman? Sister, she is you at all, Su Yusen. With a bang, the door opened. Su Peijian stood at the door and glared at Su Yusen. What the hell is wrong with you? She quickly entered the door and raised her hand to point at Su Yusen. You flew all the way to the United States just to speak up for another woman's child? Have you ever thought about how I feel? The words that Su Yusen wanted to say were interrupted because of Su Peijian's sudden appearance. He looked at Su Peijian and thought of the sibling relationship between the two of them for more than 10 years. He suddenly couldn't say the rest of the words. Su Peijian looked angry. Looking at Su Yusen's ugly face and then looking at Li Qianxue's hurt face, she was furious. Yusen, are you mom's son or not? Are you kidding me? What kind of attitude are you using to talk to mom? Have you been bewitched by a ghost? How dare you speak up for Su Qingsang? Do you know that she is not even that woman's child? She doesn't even know where the bastard came from. You actually quarreled with mom because of her. Shut up. Who are you calling a bastard? Su Yusen couldn't help but interrupt Su Peijian. She is also dad's daughter. She is also mom's daughter. With a slap, Li Qianxue raised her hand and slapped Su Yusen hard in the face. This was the first time she hit Su Yusen. The numbness from the slap made her take a few steps back. She looked at her palm and then at Su Yusen. There were tears in her eyes, but they didn't fall. She swallowed and thought about how she had been begging for more than 20 years but couldn't get it. She thought about how Su Qinghui used her love to hurt her again and again. She thought about many things, one by one. But all of them added up couldn't compare to the pain caused to her by her son standing on Su Qingsang's side and against her. Mom. Su Peijian took a few steps forward and held Li Qianxue immediately. She glared at Su Yusen. Su Yusen, are you satisfied? Do you want me to die of anger before you're satisfied? Su Yusen's face was burning. He didn't even bother to raise his hand to cover it. He looked at Li Qianxue and couldn't say the rest of the words. Mom. I just don't want you to regret it. I regret it now. Li Qianxue actually regretted it a long time ago. But she was a proud person. She was so proud that even if she knew she had gone the wrong way, she was unwilling to look back. Her body trembled a little. She stared at Su Yusen blankly, only feeling that there was a fire burning in her heart, burning her to the point where she lost all reason. I regretted it a long time ago. She regretted marrying Su Qinghui. She regretted not leaving in time when she found out that he had no hope of falling in love with her. How many years had been missed by her just like that? She had always been a proud daughter of heaven. She had been held in the palm of someone's hand. In the end, for Su Qinghui, she retreated again and again and endured again and again. Peijian, let's go. She didn't want to see her son for the time being. She turned to leave, stumbling a little. Mom. Su Yusen took a step forward. He couldn't let Li Qianxue leave just like that. Do you know what you have missed all these years? Do you know that in fact, Dad, he... Enough. Li Qianxue closed her eyes. If you still think of me as your mother, don't say any more. I don't want to listen to you now. Su Yusen watched the door open and close in front of him. His whole person became more and more dejected. He took a few steps back and sat on the bed weakly. His whole person was filled with confusion. He was in a daze in the room for a long time. He didn't know how much time had passed. He abruptly stood up and quickly walked outside. Su Peijian was already asleep. He entered her room and looked at her deeply. She was his half-sister. He should turn around and leave, but he couldn't. He thought of the news he had received. Before the Lantern Festival, Su Qingsang would go to Rome City with Hua Jinyao. It was only a few days before the Lantern Festival. If Su Qingsang really went to Rome City, Li Qianxue would know, but she would also lose her daughter. Her real daughter. He took a few steps forward and walked to the bedside. He bent down and gently pulled out a strand of Su Peijian's hair. Holding the hair tightly, he turned around and walked to Li Qianxue's room. Li Qianxue had booked a presidential suite with a total of 3 rooms. He walked in and found that Li Qianxue was still awake. Mom. Li Qianxue sat on the sofa in front of the French window. Hearing his voice, she didn't turn her head. You still know that I am your mother? Of course I know. Su Yusen took a few steps forward. He squeezed Su Peijian's hair tightly in his palm and walked to Li Qianxue. Mom, I'm sorry. My attitude wasn't very good today. Li Qianxue didn't speak. Her heart was broken. At first, it was her husband, and then it was her son. She felt that she had a hard life. She often thought that it might be because her previous life had been too smooth. That was why she couldn't get what she wanted for the rest of her life. Mom, why aren't you sleeping? Su Yusen's eyes were filled with pity. But he knew very well that if some things were not said, he was afraid that Li Qianxue would suffer even more in the future. Go to sleep. I can't sleep. Her life was a failure. Her husband didn't love her, and her son opposed her. Li Qianxue wanted to cry, but she was used to being dominant. She didn't even know how to cry now. Su Yusen stood in front of her. He looked at his mother's long hair. Chapter 430. What are you trying to say? Li Qianxue still didn't turn around. Her voice was a little hoarse, and it sounded a little suppressed. If you want to speak up for Su Qingsang, you don't have to. For so many years, she had not made a move against her, and that was already her greatest tolerance. If he still wanted her to treat Su Qingsang well, like her own daughter, she couldn't do it. She wasn't the Virgin Mary. Mom, I'm not trying to defend her. I just want to ask you, do you trust me? What are you trying to say? Li Qianxue finally turned around. She looked at Su Yusen, not understanding what he meant. Su Yusen reached out and placed his hand on Li Qianxue's shoulder. Mom, there are some things that I know you won't believe even if I tell you. So, I decided to skip the process. As he spoke, he pulled out a strand of hair from Li Qianxue's head. Su Yusen, what are you doing? Li Qianxue's scalp hurt. She couldn't help but glare at Su Yusen. What the hell do you want? Nothing. Su Yusen squeezed the 2 strands of hair in his palm. He stood up and said, Mom, have a good rest. I'm going out for a while. It's so late. Where are you going? Mom. Su Yusen took 2 steps back and looked at Li Qianxue. There was obvious pity in his eyes. He knew that when the result came out, Li Qianxue might be the first person who couldn't take it anymore. She might even break down and go crazy. But he was more afraid that Li Qianxue would find out too late. He was afraid that by the time she found out, it would already be too late to make up for it. With Li Qianxue's personality, she would not be able to take it. I have something to do, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Unfortunately, you don't know. Li Qianxue watched her son walk out. Her scalp no longer hurt. She looked at her hair and then at the direction in which Su Yusen had left. What was Su Yusen trying to do? Because of this incident, Li Qianxue and Su Peijian were not in the mood to have fun the next day. The two of them wandered around the neighborhood and finally decided to book plane tickets to go home. Before leaving, Li Qianxue called Su Yusen. He hadn't been seen since he left last night. Now that they were going home, they wanted to ask him if he wanted to go with them. Su Yusen's call did not go through. Li Qianxue frowned. Su Peijian took the phone from her hand. I think he's already gone back to his country. This Yusen, he used to be quite sensible. Who would have thought that the things I've been doing recently are getting more and more out of line? Li Qianxue didn't say anything. It was rare for her not to respond to Su Peijian. Ever since Su Yusen pulled out a strand of her hair last night, she had had a strange feeling. Her intuition told her that something was about to happen, and it was related to her. But she couldn't think of what it could be. Mom? Su Peijian hooked her arm. Let's just book 3 tickets. If he wants to go back, he'll come with us. If he doesn't, we won't wait for him. Instead, he has grown up. Li Qianxue glanced at her daughter and didn't object. She booked 3 plane tickets to return home. The plane tickets were for the next afternoon, so they still had a chance to play here for a day. Before leaving, Li Qianxue finally got in touch with Su Yusen. He said that he had something important to do and would return with them tomorrow. Li Qianxue hung up the phone, but she didn't feel very happy. She could feel that her son had grown up and had begun to have his own thoughts and opinions. The only person she was close to now was her daughter. Lin City. Su Qingsang placed the soft cushion behind Xiang Kaiping. Mom, how do you feel? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? With this cushion on my back, how can I feel uncomfortable? Xiang Kaiping had been in the hospital for more than a month. The more she spent time with Su Qingsang, the closer she felt to her daughter. Mom. Although you can do some simple movements with your waist now, you still have to be careful. You have to come to the hospital regularly for checkups and rehabilitation. But we'll have to wait until we get to Rome City. Have the plane tickets been booked? Xiang Kaiping was a little emotional when she thought about returning to Rome City. They had gone around in circles, from Lin City to Rome City, and from Rome City back to Lin City. Yes. Jinyao has everything arranged. Su Qingsang glanced at Hua Jinyao as she spoke. He smiled and walked to the other side to support Xiang Kaiping. Mom, don't worry about the plane. It's all arranged. He asked his assistant to charter the plane and bring 2 doctors and 2 nurses with them. Xiang Caiping's waist injury had not fully recovered, so there were still many things that needed attention. Look, I said I was here to take care of you, but I ended up being taken care of by you. Mom, look at you. I don't like what you said. Su Qingsang helped her sit in the wheelchair. You are my mother. Shouldn't I take care of you? Xiang Kaiping didn't say anything, but she was really touched. Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang looked at each other and pushed Xiang Kaiping out of the ward together. When they got home, they helped Xiang Kaiping to rest for a while. Su Qingsang came out of the room and looked at Hua Jinyao. When did you book the plane tickets? Why are you being so mysterious? I didn't book a plane ticket. I just chartered the plane. Hua Jinyao could tell Su Qingsang now. The day after tomorrow. So soon? Not soon. Hua Jinyao calculated the time for her. The day after tomorrow is the 13th of January. It won't be too early. The plane is at noon. Mom can sleep a little longer. When we arrive, we have to take Mom for a detailed examination and then help her settle down. After that, we can rest for a while. On the 15th, we can go home to spend the holiday with Grandpa. Su Qingsang nodded. Since Hua Jinyao had arranged everything, she had nothing to worry about. Her face was calm, but there was some hesitation in her eyes. Hua Jinyao took her hand and pulled her into his arms. I heard that Su Yusin also went to the United States. Really? That was good. The family of 3 went to have fun together. Do you want to go? If she wanted to go, he could arrange for someone to send Xiang Kaiping back to Rome City first. He would take Su Qingsang to the United States to see Li Qianxue alone. No need. What can I do if I go? Su Qingsang looked up and sighed softly. If she didn't know, she would be happier. Indeed. Hua Jinyao also admitted this. That is if your father decides to give up revenge. He won't expose that cruel truth after so many years. Su Qingsang didn't look good. She wrapped her arms around Hua Jinyao's waist and rubbed her face against his. He won't, will he? I don't know. He wasn't Su Chenghui. He couldn't guarantee his future. But he could feel that Su Chenghui already regretted it. Su Qingsang didn't say anything. She hoped not. If Su Chenghui gave up revenge, then her choice today would be meaningful. If Su Chenghui didn't give up revenge, then her revenge today would be meaningless. I don't want to. Su Qingsang looked up at him. I already have the best husband in the world and the best mother in the world. Right? Yes. Hua Jinyao nodded and kissed her gently on the lips. Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang leaned over to look at him. You will always be by my side, won't you? Of course. Hua Jinyao pressed his chin against the top of her head. I will always, always be by your side. Su Qingsang smiled with satisfaction. Her little face pressed against Hua Jinyao's chest and listened to his heartbeat. She felt that this was good. In order to make her daughter happy, Li Qianxue finally let go of her heart and followed Su Peijian to shop and go shopping. The mother and daughter swept through the pile of trophies. As a result, the suitcases they brought were all full. They bought 2 more suitcases, but it was still too little. Su Yusin came back at this time. He was holding a file bag in his hand. Seeing that Su Peijian was there, he calmly and casually put the file into his suitcase. Yusin, you came at the right time. We have too much luggage. Can your suitcase still fit? Yes. Su Yusin came in a hurry this time and didn't bring many clothes. He helped Su Peijian and Li Qianxue pack their luggage. They found that it was just right. The 3 of them had 6 suitcases. Su Yusin didn't speak. His silence was a little strange. Li Qianxue saw that her son was not right and decided to have a good talk with him when they returned to China. On the 13th of January, Li Qianxue and the other 2 took the plane yesterday afternoon. The plane landed this morning. Returning to Lin City, Su Peijian was a little nervous. Sitting in the car that Su Yusin arranged to pick her up, she looked at Li Qianxue nervously. Mom, will Dad be angry if he knows that I'm back? I don't care if he's angry or not. Li Qianxue had seen through Su Chenghui now. He didn't care about her, so why should she care about him? But Su Peijian wanted to say something. Although she knew that Su Chenghui loved her, she also knew that he had some principles. Sister, Su Yusin suddenly said lightly, why don't you go to a hotel for 2 days first? Or you can live in your apartment in the city. Let's go home first and see what Dad says. If he's not angry, you can go home? Yusin. Li Qianxue glanced at her son. She always felt that her son's arrangement was strange. Just go home directly. I'll see what your father dares to say with your grandfather around. Mom. Su Yusin's voice was faint. Let me go to the United States. Grandpa also supports it. Li Qianxue didn't say anything. Her face was a little ugly as she looked at Su Peijian. She didn't look good either. She pouted and looked at Su Yusin unhappily. But in the end, she was still afraid that Su Chenghui would be unhappy, so she went back to the apartment under her name. After Su Yusen sent her away, he followed Li Qianxue into the car. He raised the glass in the middle. Only the mother and son were left in the back of the car. Su Yusen took out the document from the suitcase and put it in front of Li Qianxue. Mom, look at this. What is this? Li Qianxue looked at the document that was all in English and didn't reach out to take it. Chapter 431. Su Yusen looked at Li Qianxue expressionlessly. Only he knew how fast his heart was beating. How intense. In his eyes, there was a faint anticipation, as well as a reckless madness. Before he went to the United States, he had thought that maybe Hu Jinyao was talking nonsense. Maybe the kids weren't switched at all. He even wanted to find the paternity test report that Hu Jinyao had mentioned. But he couldn't find it. Unable to find it, he had doubts, disbelief, and anticipation in his heart. In fact, he knew better than anyone else that exposing Su Qingsang's identity would hurt Li Qianxue the most, not anyone else. When he did the DNA test for Li Qianxue and Su Peijian, he wondered if he was wrong. Was Hu Jinyao wrong? Could Su Qingsang be wrong? But now, he knew that only one person was at fault. Su Qinghui. Everything started with him. As Su Qinghui's son, he had to make up for his mistake. He wanted to get everything back on track. Paternity test? Whose? Li Qianxue looked at the report, and she had a bad feeling. You'll follow me. Su Yusen's voice was very soft. When I was in the United States, I took your and my sister's hair and did a paternity test. Li Qianxue's expression suddenly changed. Su Yusen, what do you mean? Su Peijian was her biological daughter, and now Su Yusen was doing a paternity test for her and Su Peijian? Was he crazy? Mom. Don't worry. Take a look first. I'll tell you what I mean after you're done. I don't want to see it. Li Qianxue's intuition told her that it was not something good. She refused to look at it. Mom. Are you sure? Are you sure you don't want to watch it? Su Yusen pushed the report a little closer. His gaze was firm as he stared straight at Li Qianxue's face. Li Qianxue thought about how Su Yusen had asked Su Peijian to leave as soon as he returned to Lin City. She also thought about how he had gone to the United States on purpose and how he had said those inexplicable things to her. She stared at him with wide eyes and slowly took the test results from him. She didn't rush to open it, but stared at Su Yusen in front of her. Su Yusen. What do you know? Tell me. Mom, you'd better finish reading first, then listen to me. Su Yusen tried his best to control it, but his voice still trembled. Who would have guessed? Who would have thought that Su Qinghui would do such a thing? Li Qianxue pulled out the report. She kept staring at Su Yusen's face. When the thin piece of paper was pulled out, she lowered her head and her gaze fell on the appraisal report. The appraisal report was done in America, and it was all in English. But for Li Qianxue, none of that was a problem. Her eyes were fixed on the English letters, almost as if she wanted to separate each letter and then reassemble it. But no matter how he disassembled it, no matter how he combined it, content that wouldn't change would never change. Li Qianxue and Su Peijian did not conform to the laws of inheritance, 100% ruled out as mother-daughter relationship. She squeezed the piece of paper tightly and looked up at Su Yusen. What did you do? What did you do? Su Yusen felt as if a huge stone was pressing down on his heart. He reached out and held Li Qianxue's hand tightly. Mom, you shouldn't ask me what I did. You should ask, what did my father do? Li Qianxue was a smart person. She squeezed Su Yusen's hand tightly. She was so hard that she almost pinched her nails into his flesh. What do you mean? What did your father do? Where's my daughter? Peijian isn't my daughter. Then what about my daughter? Where was the daughter she had given birth to after 10 months of pregnancy? If it wasn't for Su Peijian, where would she be now? Her eyes were red. Su Yusin couldn't bear it. He turned his face away. Mom, you've been watching over her all this time. Make it clear, Su Yusin. Su Yusin. Li Qianshue's hand tightened. Su Yusin was in pain, but he didn't pull her hand away. He closed his eyes and suppressed the urge to cry. He turned to look at Li Qianxue and said word by word. Mom. Don't you understand yet? You've been watching over her all this time. She's been living at home. Li Qianshue's hand loosened. Su Yusin's words pointed everything to a very terrible fact. He seemed to have said it the day he went to the United States. She heard it, but she didn't take it to heart. Now, Su Yusin had once again brought this matter to the table. Her faint woman's sixth sense allowed her to guess at this time. But she refused such speculation. She wanted to ask clearly. She wanted to be sure of the final answer. She bit her lip so hard that it almost bled. There was no longer a trace of elegance on her well-maintained face. There was only shock, disbelief, and rejection. Su Yusin. Make it clear. What do you want to say? What do you want to say? Say it. Mom. Su Yusin chuckled. There was mockery, helplessness, bitterness, pity, and sympathy in that smile. Why do you still have to deceive yourself? You're so smart. You've already guessed it, haven't you? Impossible. Li Qianxue closed her eyes. In the blink of an eye, many images and many things flashed through her mind. She didn't believe it. How could she believe it? Su Yusin didn't give her a chance. He held her shoulders and stared at her face, his eyes full of sympathy. Mom. 25 years ago, the child you gave birth to was replaced by your father. He took that woman's child back and treated it as your child. And your child was taken away by him. I don't know what happened later, but in the end, he still took the child back and raised it in the Su family. But that child was no longer the granddaughter of the Li family. She was no longer the daughter of the Su family. That child became the illegitimate daughter of the Su family. It was Su Qingsang. Li Qianshue's face was so pale that there was no trace of blood. Her whole body froze there, sluggish and unable to move. Su Yusin couldn't bear to continue, but he had to continue. Mom. Su Qingsang is your daughter. She's my sister, my biological sister. Mom. It's all true. Hua Jinyao found out about his sister's background and went to his father to question him. I just heard it. Mom. Did you hear it clearly? Su Qingsang is your daughter. Su Peijian, she is, Su Yusin couldn't bear to say more. Once some things were uncovered, only the true ugliness would be revealed. He knew the result, but he had no choice but to uncover that piece of cloth. Li Qianxue had been listening to Su Yusin. Su Yusin was afraid that she wouldn't believe him, so he repeated what Hua Jinyao had said to Su Qinghui. Mom. The facts were clear. I know this may be hard for you. But the truth is, stop the car. Stop the car. Li Qianxue suddenly moved. She even forgot that the car was still moving and reached out to pull the door. Su Yusin quickly stopped her. Mom, what are you doing? I'm going to find Su Qinghui. I'm going to see Su Qinghui. Mom, stop the car. I'm going to find him. I'm going to find him and ask him. Li Qianshue's eyes were a little blank and empty. There was also disbelief and shock. She didn't believe it. She didn't want to believe a single word. Mom. It's no use looking for him. He won't admit it. Hua Jinyao had put all the evidence in front of Su Qinghui. Did he admit it? Not at all. He would never admit it. Because this was his revenge. How could he admit to Li Qianxue that he had done something wrong? Li Qianxue stopped moving and leaned back in the chair weakly. She felt a sharp pain in her heart. Someone was holding a knife and stabbing her heart again and again. She couldn't stand the pain anymore. She sat up and could hardly sit still. It hurt. It really hurt. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe a single word. Her voice was soft and trembling. Mom. Whether you believe it or not, it's the truth. Su Qingsang is your daughter. She's my sister. Su Yusin reached out and held her. His eyes were firm. Mom, I've already asked the driver to go to my sister's house. She's my sister. We're going to take her home. Li Qianxue lowered her head again. Su Yusin felt hot tears fall on the back of his hand. The temperature almost burned him. He could still feel Li Qianxue trembling. She had suffered a blow. He knew. But such a blow would come sooner or later. If he hadn't heard the conversation between Su Chenghui and Hua Jinyao, he could pretend that nothing had happened. If he hadn't done a paternity test for Su Peijian and Li Qianxue, he could pretend that nothing had happened. But he couldn't. He couldn't just turn a blind eye to it. He couldn't let Su Chenghui keep deceiving them. More importantly, he couldn't still treat Su Qingsang as an illegitimate daughter, knowing that she was his biological sister. After Li Qianxue's heart ached, her head felt like it was about to explode. Countless images and conversations flashed through her mind. Her argument with Su Chenghui. That day, Su Chenghui kept saying that he didn't have other women. He was a proud man. She knew that. So when he said that he didn't have other women, she didn't believe him at the time. She only thought that he was making excuses for himself. Now, after listening to Su Yusin's words, she understood everything. Su Chenghui didn't have other women. He really didn't betray her. He didn't have a third woman. But what he did hurt her more than the fact that he had a woman outside. Her heart began to hurt again. Li Qianxue was in so much pain that her whole body was trembling. She leaned weakly on Su Yusin's shoulder. Mom, calm down. Su Yusin held her and didn't let her break down like this. Calm down. We still have to pick up my sister. Li Qianxue shook her head gently. Her eyes were blurred by tears. She couldn't see clearly, and she couldn't see clearly. She couldn't control her body's reaction. It was like she couldn't control her heartache. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.